Did you know that more than 90% of viewers don't subscribe to our channel? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We don't run ads on our videos, so we don't earn anything from them. Every subscription, every like, every comment truly means the world to us. Your support keeps our passion alive and motivates us to create more. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's start our story.
Story number 1. The fog came down over Route 71 so slowly, Daniel almost didn't notice. At first, it was only a pale haze on the edges of his high beams, a softening of silhouettes along the shoulder. Fence posts blurred together, then disappeared entirely. The trees beyond became only suggestions, tall, darker shadows inside a larger dark. The cab of his truck was a warm, humming cocoon in contrast. The dash glowed in quiet greens and ambers. The low murmur of the engine, the whispery thrum of tires over asphalt, and the faint rattle in the passenger side door blended into a constant, comforting noise. Coffee steamed in the cup holder, its scent mixing with the leather of the seat and a faint trace of motor oil. Daniel's hand sat easy but firm on the wheel, big palms wrapped around worn, familiar grooves. The wheel vibrated gently, passing up the invisible language of the road. A slight seam here, a patched dip there, the smoothness of a fresh repave, the faint chatter of a bridge. He had been driving for hours, heading north with a refrigerated trailer humming behind him. Frozen produce, nothing exciting, nothing fragile. He liked that. Solid cargo, predictable. The trailer followed obediently, a dark, hulking silhouette in the side mirrors whenever the fog thinned for a moment. The clock on the dash glowed with soft digits, but he didn't look at it much. Time on the road felt different, pulled out like taffy. It was easier just to fall into rhythm. Wipers dragged slowly across the glass with a soft rubber whisper, pushing away beads of mist that always returned. The fog thickened in quiet increments. Headlights shrank inward. The far end of his high-beam cone shortened until the world seemed only 30 yards long. A short stretch of road, the double yellow, the white line along the shoulder, and then nothing. A wall of soft, bright, opaque gray. He passed a green highway sign on the right. The fog turned it into a glowing rectangle with ghostly letters. Exit 214, Ridgeway 3 miles. Daniel barely glanced at it, just enough for the text to imprint before the sign slid back into the blank white of his mirrors. Ridgeway meant a small town, a gas station with yellow bright lights, maybe a diner that would still be open. He had enough fuel to keep going. The quiet suited him tonight. The CB crackled, then lapsed back into a low, static hiss. Occasionally, a distant voice would nibble at the edges of reception, someone 40, 50 miles away, but the words never came through clear enough to bother interpreting. The fog tightened around the truck. It wasn't only thick, it was textured, Daniel thought. It moved in subtle waves like a pale ocean. It billowed low and rolled high, sometimes cutting off his view of the road entirely for one breath, then easing away just enough for him to see the reflective paint at his tires. He slowed instinctively, easing off the accelerator, letting the speedometer drift down. The hum of the engine softened. The sensation of moving through space began to feel oddly displaced, like floating rather than driving. A green marker post rose out of the gray on the right, thin, almost translucent before it rushed past. Mile 247. The number registered in a calm, distant part of his mind. Nothing special about it. He had driven this route before. He knew the gentle bends and the long straights, the modest ups and downs. He knew there was a rest area somewhere further ahead, and a couple of minor exits he never took. The fog swelled. The highway lamps, spaced far apart, were only dim suggestion now, each one a hazy orb that barely reached the ground. The CB crackled again. 7-1 northbound, watch that fog, reports of low-vis quarter mile or less. The voice faded in and out, blending with a wash of static, like someone trying to speak through a snowstorm. Daniel adjusted the volume a notch without taking his eyes off the road. The plastic knob turned beneath his fingers with a tiny click. He passed another green marker, more sudden this time, emerging almost at the last moment. Mile 247. Daniel's brow creased a little. Maybe he'd misread the first one. It happened. Numbers blurred when a driver was tired. Still, his mind snagged on it, held the detail lightly like a thumb on a page. The road remained unremarkable. No exits, no overpasses, just the soft roll of highway through featureless fields. The fog erased everything beyond the guardrails. For all the world outside his cab mattered, he could have been driving through the sky. He took a sip of coffee. It had cooled, the bitter taste flattening out on his tongue. The warmth that slipped down his throat was modest but real, a small reassurance in the hollow, distant feel that sometimes came with these late stretches. Wind buffeted gently against the side of the trailer, not strong enough to push, only enough to remind him there was still weather beyond the glass. Another green marker slid by on the right. Mile 247. This time he couldn't dismiss it. A small, quiet alert switched on in his mind. Daniel checked his mirrors, then the rear view, then the gauges. Everything sat exactly where it should. Oil pressure steady. Engine temp in the usual band. Fuel gauge a little below 3/4. Speed just under the limit where he liked to keep it in weather like this. He reached out and tapped the face of the clock once, an old habit. The digits remained steady, glowing their patient numbers. Time was moving normally. His truck was moving normally. The fog pressed closer. He leaned forward slightly, elbows loosening, shoulders rolling to relieve tension. The seat creaked beneath him faintly. His headlights shone into a bleached corridor, the edges of their beam feathered and soft. Probably a misprint, he said to no one, but his lips barely moved, and the words came out in a low exhale more than a proper sentence. He drove on. 10 minutes, or what felt like 10 minutes, slid past. The rhythm of the wipers became more hypnotic. Thunk, hiss. Thunk, hiss. A small squeak at the end of each pass marked the rubber meeting the far edge of the windshield. The engine's hum filled the cab with a steady, low vibration, working its way up through the seat and into his spine. The gentle motion of the truck over the slight undulations of the road sent a lulling, almost rocking cadence through his body. Then another marker loomed up. Mile 247. It stood there innocently enough, a moss-green strip of metal with white numerals, half swallowed by fog by the time his brain registered it fully. Daniel exhaled slowly, not quite a sigh. From above, if anyone had been watching, the truck would have looked like a small, moving scar of light slipping through a sea of rolling cloud. The highway wound north in a subtle curve, vanishing beneath the low-hung mist. No other headlights broke the distance. No rear taillights shone ahead. Just one rig, one driver, and a stretch of road that did not seem entirely willing to move on. Inside the cab, the air was warm. His breath left faint ghosts on the side window whenever he turned his head. The dashboard glowed on, unconcerned. The CB muttered a few stray syllables that never formed words. The next shape the fog surrendered was not a mile marker but a sign. Rest area 2 miles. Underneath, a smaller line of text, no services. Daniel remembered this. He had stopped there once months ago on a different run. A quiet place, just bathrooms, vending machines, a few picnic tables he had never seen anyone use. Long, narrow parking lanes for trucks, lights that always looked a little underpowered. He drove on, anticipation of the familiar anchoring him. 2 miles easily timed. At his current speed, less than 3 minutes. The road purred beneath him. White lines appeared, slid under the nose of his truck and vanished. The fog did not break. The world stayed contained to that same, narrow, illuminated tunnel. 3 minutes passed, then 4. No blue information board. No gradually widening shoulder announcing an upcoming off-ramp. No rest area. He watched the odometer tick over another mile, then another. The CB, as if sensing his quiet attention, flickered to life. Copy northbound 71. You hanging out in that soup too? The message ghosted in and out, the voice stretched thin by distance and interference. Daniel reached for the radio mic, then stopped halfway. His hand hovered, fingers resting on the worn plastic, then eased back. There was something about the silence that felt fragile, as if speaking into it too loudly might crack whatever held it together. He let his hand return to the wheel. Fog pressed tightly against the glass, so bright in his headlights that it almost glowed. For a moment, it gave the unnerving impression that the truck was standing still and the fog was flowing around it like bright smoke. The green shape of another marker resolved itself on the right, swimming into being slowly. Mile 247. The number glared up at him, more obvious this time because he was waiting for it. The numerals seemed almost too sharp against the muted world. His heart did not pound exactly. It lifted, like a bird giving one testing beat of its wings. From outside the cab, nothing looked wrong. The truck moved along at a steady, respectable speed. Its lights cut two clean lanes through the mist. Its exhaust wafted back in a ragged plume, instantly devoured by the fog. Inside, though, the air felt subtly different, thinner, perhaps more alert. Daniel listened to the engine with the practiced ear of someone who had known machines most of his life. It sounded solid. No strange knocks, no faltering. The needle on the tachometer swept its usual small arc. He glanced ahead, then quickly to the right, half-hopping for the hint of an exit sign. The fog gave him nothing. A thought, quiet and unwelcome, rose in him. Maybe he had missed the rest area turnoff. Maybe the sign had been old, a relic someone forgot to take down. That would explain the delay. Roads changed. Construction happened. He almost believed it, almost tucked it away and let his mind accept that version. But then another sign appeared, rectangular, elevated, the exact shape and color of the last. Rest area 2 miles. No services. It slid past him like a sentence he had already read in a book he didn't remember picking up. His throat tightened a little. He flexed his hands on the wheel. The vinyl cover creaked softly. The CB crackled again, sharper this time, as if something had leaned closer to the microphone on the other end. Northbound reefer on 7-1, a voice said, clearer but still wrapped in static. You're running light on rest. Eyes are heavy. You ought to pull off. The tiny hairs at the back of Daniel's neck rose, not out of fear exactly, but in the way they did when someone said his name unexpectedly in a crowded room. He had not shared his location or his cargo with anyone on this channel tonight. He glanced at the radio. Its red LED display stared back, calm and unchanged. Channel 19. Another marker on the right. Mile 247. For a moment, his reflection hovered faintly in the side window. Strong nose, faint stubble, eyes shadowed in the dashboard glow. The ghost of his face floated over the endless white outside, as though he were looking directly into himself. The voice on the radio softened. No need to get spooked, it murmured, gentler now, threaded with an odd, soothing cadence. Just a long stretch. Fog plays tricks. There's a place to stop up ahead. You know it. It occurred to Daniel, with a slightly detached curiosity, that the voice did not quite sound like a stranger. There were cadences, pauses, little rhythms that echoed patterns he used himself when he was tired and trying to stay calm. He did not reach for the mic. He did not answer. The road offered a new shape at last. On the right, just ahead, the soft incline of a ramp began to reveal itself, the white line bending away into the fog. A small square sign stood guard. Rest area. An arrow pointed up the ramp, its head barely visible. Relief moved through him like a quiet wave. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. He flicked on his turn signal, more out of habit than necessity. There was no one behind him to see the blinking amber. The truck veered smoothly onto the exit lane. The main highway slipped away to the left, swallowed almost immediately by the white. The new pavement under his tires sounded slightly different, a subtle change in tone only a practiced ear would register. The ramp curved gently. The fog thinned by degrees, not breaking but lightening, as though the air here was less saturated. Sparse trees emerged in ghostly vertical lines. The faint orange palm of a sodium vapor lot light appeared ahead, surrounded by a soft halo. He rolled into the rest area slowly. Empty, or at least nearly. A few angled car spaces sat vacant nearest the low, blocky building that housed the restrooms and vending machines. The structure itself had an older look, 70s concrete, a flat roof, narrow windows. The paint on the walls had peeled in spots, exposing gray beneath the muted beige. Farther down, the longer truck lanes stretched into the mist. In one of them, a tractor-trailer sat parked, dark and still. No running lights. No sign of movement in the cab. Its trailer was unmarked white. Daniel eased his own rig into the lane beside it, leaving a polite gap. Gravel crunched softly as he braked to a halt. The engine dropped down to a low idle, then, at the turn of a key, shuttered off. Silence stepped in. It was not true silence. The world always hummed. Far off, something chirped. Night insects clustered in grass along the edges of the pavement. The wind moved, too, just enough to rustle unseen leaves. But the comforting roar of motion, the hum of tires and engine, the white noise of travel gone on so long his ears had forgotten how to hear around it, that was absent. The cab felt instantly larger and smaller at once without the engine running. The air cooled a little. The glow from the dashboard dimmed as some of the electronics powered down. He sat there for a long moment, fingers still curled loosely around the wheel, just listening. The fog here lay in gentle layers. He could see past it in places, the silhouettes of picnic tables, the squat shape of a trash bin, the dark, mute presence of the other truck. Lot lights hummed faintly overhead. Their orange spill left corners of the area in softer, deeper shadow. Finally, he unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded unusually loud. He opened the door. The hinges complained softly, a light, metallic groan. Cool, damp air washed in. He climbed down, boots meeting concrete with a dull thud. The ground felt solid and reassuring. The smell out here was different. Wet pavement, faint traces of diesel, a hint of pine from the surrounding trees. Fog pressed softly against his jeans. It moved like breath around his ankles. From an angle, his own truck looked immense and strangely vulnerable, its familiar lines softened by the mist. The chrome on the grille reflected the lot light in smudged blurs. He glanced toward the other rig. From this close, he could make out details. Older model tractor, paint a few years past its prime, trailer doors secured. No company name, no dot numbers. The windshield reflected only pale, distorted light. No movement inside, no sound. He considered walking over, maybe checking if anyone was awake, if anyone wanted to talk a bit. Truck stop conversations had a way of anchoring a person, reminding them they weren't the only ones living half their life between mile markers. But something about the stillness of that truck felt complete, like a closed book on a high shelf. Not unfriendly, just finished. Instead, he turned toward the building. The concrete under his boots bore faint stains of long-ago oil drips and muddy footprints weather had tried to erase. As he approached, the motion sensor above the door flickered the entrance light a shade brighter, though it had clearly already been on. The glass door was smudged at hand height, opaque where countless palms had pushed it open and closed. When he touched it, the metal handle was cool. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead in long, buzzing rows. Their glow was harsher, more clinical after the soft sodium orange outside, but they were steady. No flicker. The air smelled vaguely of industrial cleaner, old coffee and paper towels. On the left, the restrooms. On the right, a row of vending machines, their contents lit like tiny stages. Soda, candy bars, chips, plastic-wrapped pastries that all looked the same shade of beige. Placed between them stood a lone, battered coffee vending machine, its panel promising an array of options, most likely all tasting nearly identical. A bulletin board took up most of the far wall. Flyers overlapped in a collage of community announcements and trucking notices. Lost dogs, church suppers, a faded poster about winter tire regulations. A laminated sheet about drowsy driving displayed a cheerful graphic of a sleepy cartoon driver with drooping eyelids. At the bottom corner of the bulletin board, half covered by a flyer for a pancake breakfast in Ridgeway, Daniel noticed a calendar. He stepped closer. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. The picture at the top showed a smiling family standing in front of a generic farmhouse under a blue sky. The month and year printed beneath it made his eyes narrow, more out of curiosity than alarm. The year was wrong, decades wrong. He tilted his head, double-checking. The days of the week lined up with the dates properly. The calendar itself was correct in layout, but the year printed in neat, bold type belonged to a time when he had been much younger. He lifted the corner of the paper with one finger. The page did not peel away to reveal a current month beneath. No tear-off stack, just one sheet pinned. Someone could have hung it as a joke, some nostalgic impulse. It meant nothing on its own, not really. Still, the detail joined the chorus of small oddities that had been carefully, quietly assembling in the back of his mind. He turned away, getting himself a drink from the machine more out of ritual than need. The clunk of a paper cup, the trickle and hiss of liquid, the slight rattle as the machine settled, these sounds were comfortingly mundane. When he stepped back outside, cup warming his hand, the fog had shifted again. It was thinner directly around his truck now, as if conceding a bubble of clearer air. Beyond that, it swirled in slow-motion eddies, forming thick curtains across the far edge of the lot. The trees surrounding the rest area appeared in hazy tiers, their trunks fading into white. Daniel's truck loomed quietly where he had left it. The other rig sat just as still. But where his own windshield showed the faint reflection of the lot lights and the vague outline of the steering wheel, the other truck's windshield was entirely opaque, as though something dark pressed against the inside of the glass, blocking all view. He watched it for a long moment. Nothing moved, no engine kicked over, no curtain twitched. The CB inside his cab crackled, the sound muffled but distinct, a soft, low wash of static. Then a voice, just barely audible through the closed door and windows, rose like a whisper. "Get some rest, Daniel." His name spoken in his own truck, in that same almost familiar cadence. The cup in his hand felt steady enough. His pulse had picked up only a little, a small acceleration like a truck easing down a slight incline. Not panic, not even fear exactly, just heightened awareness, a sense of standing on the edge of something not entirely mapped. He moved toward the cab. When he opened the door and climbed in, the interior felt exactly as he had left it. The seat still held the slight warmth of his body. The dash glowed softly. The CB sat in its cradle, red LED display burning steadily, speaker letting out a faint, soothing hiss. No recent transmission light flickered. The mic hung where it always did, its coiled cord relaxed. He set his drink in the cup holder. The scent of artificial coffee rose up. He sat back, closed the door with a familiar solid thunk, and let the small, enclosed space fold around him once more. For a long time, he simply sat and listened. The fog outside brushed against the cab in soundless currents. Lot lights hummed. Some small part in the dashboard clicked faintly as it cycled. His eyelids felt heavier than they had on the road. The kind of heaviness that went beyond fatigue of muscles and bones, down into something more fundamental. A heaviness that said, "Stop now. Even if the road seems to go on forever, you do not have to." He thought of the recurring mile marker. He thought of the rest area sign that had promised an arrival that did not come, until it did, as though the road had finally offered him a way out of a loop he hadn't recognized he was in. The CB murmured again, so softly he almost could have dismissed it as his imagination. "Sleep a while." The voice carried no edge of menace. It held a tone he had used himself when talking to newer drivers about the trap of pushing too hard. Patient, almost wry, lined with quiet concern. His concern reflected back at him from somewhere just beyond the edges of the map. Daniel leaned the seat back a notch. The leather creaked gently. He reached behind him, pulling his folded blanket up and over his lap in a practiced motion. The material's weight settled over him, comforting, familiar. Through half-lowered lids, he watched the fog play outside his windshield. It thickened and thinned, glowed and dimmed, like a slow, pale tide. For just a moment, the glass showed him a reflection not of the parking lot, but of a narrow stretch of highway and a green sign. Mile 247. He blinked. The vision faded, leaving only the faint blur of lot light and the faint suggestion of his own face. His breathing deepened. The last traces of adrenaline ebbed away, replaced by something softer, not exactly understanding, but acceptance of the not knowing. Outside, the other truck sat in its lane, patient and unmoving, like a monument to every driver who had ever needed a place beyond time to rest and had found it here, in this pocket of fog and concrete. Sleep settled over him slowly, like the fog itself, layer by layer, thin and cool and strangely kind. The road, for once, could go on without him. Hours, or what might have been minutes, or longer than that, passed in a smooth, unbroken line he could not later measure. When he woke, pale light filtered through the windshield, gentler and clearer than before. His blanket had slipped halfway down. The air in the cab was cooler but dry. He pushed the seat upright. The world outside had changed. The fog was gone. Not entirely, not forever. The distant tree line still wore a few wisps like scarves, but the heavy, smothering wall had lifted. The sky overhead showed a pale, washed-out blue between long bands of cloud. The lot lights had shut off, no longer needed. The rest area looked normal, more mundane in daylight. Flaws and details more apparent. A crack in the pavement here, a trash can lid slightly askew, faded paint on the parking lines. A maintenance truck sat farther down the lot where nothing had been before. A worker in an orange vest opening a metal utility box. The other tractor-trailer was gone. No tracks remained to mark where it had rolled out, just an empty lane. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the rasp of stubble, the lingering imprint of sleep around his eyes. His body felt heavy but clearer somehow, as though something in him had been recalibrated. The CB was quiet. He started the engine. The familiar rumble sprang back to life, filling the cab with gentle vibration. Gauges rose to their usual positions. Outside, a bird took off from the roof of the building in a flurry of wings. Before pulling out, he glanced once more at the concrete structure. Inside, under harsh fluorescent lights, the old calendar on the bulletin board now showed a different year. His year, the current one. The smiling family on the page had been replaced by a photograph of a forested overlook he did not recognize. He couldn't see anyone in there. The door remained closed. He eased the truck out of the lane, tires crunching lightly over fine gravel. The ramp back to the highway curved upward, the sky broadening ahead of him. When he merged onto Route 71 once more, the road felt new under his tires, as if repaved night. The horizon stretched away clearly now, gentle hills and far-off lines of trees visible in both directions. A mile marker approached on the right. Mile 289. Daniel's mouth lifted in a small, private smile. From above, the truck was only one among many now. Headlights and taillights moved along the veins of highway in slow, shining streams, each driver with their own timetable, their own destination, their own small set of mysteries on the way. Back in the cab, the steady hum of the engine, the soft swish of tires, and the distant murmur of the CB blended together again, a familiar lullaby of the road. The odd loop of fog, the repeating mile, the voice on the radio that had sounded just enough like his own, those became part of the landscape of memory. Not a threat, not a terror, but a reminder. Sometimes, on long, empty stretches of highway, the world folded a little, nudging those who needed it toward a place where time loosened its grip and the road paused, just long enough for a driver to rest inside a pocket of quiet no map could name. And then, as gently as a gear shift sliding into place, everything moved forward again. Story number 2. On the maps tucked into glove boxes and clipped beside dispatch desks, Hollow Ridge was a simple, jagged line. Route 43 wound through the mountains there in a series of tight switchbacks and long, steep grades. In daylight, the road was scenic overlooks, glimpses of distant valleys, the faint hint of snow on the highest peaks even in late spring. There were pullouts for photos, a lodge or two, a gas station that sold hot chocolate in paper cups. At night, Hollow Ridge was another thing entirely. The warning signs began 15 miles before the first climb. Trucks check brakes. Steep grade next 10 miles. Beneath that, a smaller line. Runaway ramp ahead 3 miles. Mara read the sign as she passed, the reflective letters briefly flaring white in her headlights before vanishing back into the dark. Her truck hummed strongly beneath her, a newer rig with a comfortable sleeper, and a dashboard lit in soft blues and greens. The familiar palette of gauges and dials wrapped around her in a gentle curve. The steering wheel, shaped by hundreds of hours beneath her hands, felt steady. The smell in the cab was a mix of coffee, upholstery, and the faint trace of pine that had slipped in at the last fuel stop when she'd opened the window. Outside, the world narrowed to the reach of her headlights and the blackness beyond. Traffic had thinned over the last hour until she moved alone more often than not. A few cars, a distant pair of taillights here and there, another rig far behind with its speck of white climbing slowly in her mirror. Mostly, though, it was the road and the mountains and the slow pull of time. The first tendrils of fog appeared as she began to climb. They came shyly at first, just faint wisps across the beam, ragged shapes torn from some larger body of mist farther up. They slid over the asphalt and drifted aside, unwilling yet to commit. Mara felt the grade change through her feet, a deepening resistance, the engine working fractionally harder. She eased into a lower gear, the sound rising, settling, finding its new, stronger rhythm. The hum became a textured growl, not angry, just engaged. On either side of the highway, darkness hid the drop-offs and slopes. Guardrails flashed in the light, little bursts of silver that stitched the edge of the road into a line. She had driven Hollow Ridge 3 times before. Always at reasonable hours, though, in heavy afternoon cloud or the long light of early evening. She remembered certain landmarks, an old, leaning billboard advertising a lodge that had closed years ago, a gas station half-wedged into the rock on the right, a small overlook with a stone wall, and a view of the valley if the weather cooperated. Tonight, the mountain felt different. Not hostile, not even unfriendly, but distant and watchful, like a host who had not expected company. The CB radio whispered softly, a continuous string of low static with the occasional pop. Most of the truckers who ran Hollow Ridge at night left the channel on, even if they rarely spoke, just in case someone needed a warning, a heads-up about ice or an animal on the road. Mara liked the company of that soft, meaningless noise. It reminded her that out there, even when invisible, were other drivers threading their own way through the dark. The fog thickened around the 3rd-mile marker into the climb. At first, it settled in the low spots, thin gray puddles in the dips of the road. Then it began to rise, rolling down from the tree line in slow, deliberate sheets. It moved with the mountains breathing, pooling here, lifting there, always returning thicker than before. Her high beams turned it from a light haze into a solid wall of pale white. She dropped them back to low, watching the world close in. The night became intimate. The windshield framed a small, carefully lit stage. The 2 lanes of dark asphalt, the center lines double yellow, the white edge strip. Beyond that, nothing. The guardrails and rocky embankments appeared only as they approached, sliding into existence and then away again. Mara slowed, not dramatically, just enough to keep the truck comfortable. The speedometer's needle nudged downward. The engine's note lowered but did not strain. Her hand stayed steady on the wheel. A sign rose out of the fog ahead, its reflective surface glowing softly before the letters became clear. Trucks check brakes. Steep grade next 10 miles. She blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion. She had passed that sign already. The same placement, the same slightly crooked post, the same small patch of scrubby grass at its base. 3 miles into the climb, she had watched it slide past, mentally ticking it off as a reminder. Now here it was again. Mara glanced down at the odometer. The numbers rolled along comfortably, reflecting the miles she'd covered since leaving the last rest stop. They did not appear confused. Nothing blinked. No warning lights glowed. The grade remained. The engine still worked a bit harder than on flat ground. Her ears, long trained to the subtle language of machinery, picked up nothing out of place. The CB crackled, then quieted. Ahead the fog lay thick and patient. She drove on. The highway continued to climb, curving in broad, lazy S-shapes around the mountain's shoulder. The white line on the right felt closer now, more quickly recurring, almost hypnotic as it flashed and vanished under the bumper. Her mind turned the repeated sign over, examining it from all sides. She considered that perhaps there had been 2 of them. Transportation departments put up duplicates sometimes, especially on dangerous stretches. Warnings repeated because drivers missed the first while checking a mirror or adjusting the radio. That explanation sat tolerably in her thoughts, enough to keep her from glancing back over her shoulder. Mist brushed against the cab, little swirls tugging at the edges of her perception. The droplets on the windshield beaded together and ran, erased by the slow, steady sweep of the wipers. Another sign materialized, its presence telegraphed by a faint, brighter rectangle in the white. Runaway ramp ahead 3 miles. The same font, the same arrangement. A small arrow on the bottom line pointing up and to the right, indicating the lane would split. Mara's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. She remembered that sign very clearly. It had marked the beginning of the steepest portion of the descent on the far side of the ridge, the part where gravity seemed to lean hard on the back end of the trailer, where she rode the Jake brake and watched her speed like a hawk. But she was still climbing. The road tilted up, not down. The pull in her chest, the subtle angle of her body in the seat, the pressure on the accelerator, every cue said they were going higher, not lower. On the CB, a voice ghosted through the static, so faint she almost missed it. Else fogged in up here. The words slipped through in fragments, the rest lost to a hush. Mara reached toward the mic, then stopped, her fingers hovering. A strange reluctance brushed her, not fear exactly. A feeling as though speaking would be like stepping out onto ice she wasn't quite sure of. She let her hand fall back. The truck moved on, a quiet, steady presence in the fog. From above, if anyone had been watching, it would have looked like a little bar of light drifting through a bowl of cloud, drawing slow loops on the mountainside. The warning sign vanished behind her, swallowed by white. Minutes stretched. The climb continued until, almost imperceptibly, the road began to level. The pressure at her back eased. The engine's tone changed again, settling into something easier. She didn't feel the crest so much as realize, 50 yards past it, that she was no longer pulling up. The fog lay even thicker on the other side. It poured over the ridge like water, tumbling down invisible slopes in soft currents. The world beyond her headlights was a bright, formless mass. She eased into a lower gear, anticipating the descent. Her right foot poised over the brake, careful, practiced. She had done this 100 times on other mountains, manage the weight, control the drop, keep the rig in the right speed range. It was a quiet, exacting dance. The truck tipped gently over the ridge's spine and began to point down. Gravity added its hand to the push. The trailer's weight carried forward, whispering its intent through the frame. The road curved away, the guardrails on the right now protecting a drop she could not see. Her headlights painted the first sign on the downhill side into being. Trucks use low gear. Then farther on. Runaway ramp ahead, 1 mile. Mara watched it pass, grounding herself in the familiarity. This, at least, matched her memory. She pictured the ramp, a long lane of deep gravel angling up, a place to aim a rig if the brakes failed, to let the earth and stone claw away speed. She had never used one. No driver wanted to. It meant something had gone far enough wrong that the only way out was to give up control and trust the mountain to hold you. The grade sharpened. She let the Jake brake take most of it, applying the pedal in brief, firm taps when needed, never riding it long. The smell of hot metal never came. The truck obeyed. The needle on the speedometer hovered exactly where she wanted it. Fog pressed close on either side. It made the world small, intimate, like a tunnel that never quite acknowledged it had walls. Banked curves rose and fell. Round a bend, a shadowy shape emerged at the roadside, a great, leaning billboard, its tall frame barely visible in silhouette. Her lights caught the torn canvas face of it. Welcome to unsettling. Fireplace views home cooking. Someone long ago had painted in a phone number at the bottom. It had faded into nearly illegible smudges. Mara remembered that, too. The lodge at the bottom of the ridge had closed years before she ever ran this route. The billboard had remained as a kind of ghost, its message still hopeful, though no one answered the listed number. She passed it. The letters, bleached and cracked, slid out of sight. Ahead, she watched for the gravel ramp split, a widening of the right shoulder, a new lane of pale stone reaching away uphill. The sign should have appeared in less than a mile. It did. The white rectangle rose, its message simple. Runaway ramp. An arrow jabbed to the right. Mara exhaled, a small, controlled breath of acknowledgement. Just knowing it was there eased something at the back of her mind, the awareness of a safety net she didn't plan to use. Except when she passed the sign, no ramp appeared. The shoulder stayed narrow. The guardrail kept its close, reflective vigil. The road bent, then straightened. Fog rolled across it in sheets. She scanned the right side closely, slowing a little more. The pavement gave her nothing. The CB popped and hissed. You see it, missed it too. A voice barely there. Mara's heart did not lurch. It simply became more awake. A subtle tightening, like a hand closing more fully around a mug of hot coffee. From the outside, nothing about her truck betrayed the flicker of unease. It continued its descent at a sane, safe speed. Its lights held steady, painting clean lines through the mist. Its exhaust trailed back in muted plumes. The mountain curled around her. The next curve was a broad, sweeping left. She took it smoothly, the trailer following in obedient arc. When the road straightened, another billboard loomed, taller this time, its canvas more intact. unsettling Lodge, exit 12. Food, fuel, CBNS. The same smiling, painted couple in winter coats stood before a log building. Snow piled around the foundation in neat, inviting drifts. She had seen this billboard, too. On previous runs, it had always tickled the back of her mind. There was no exit 12 on this stretch anymore. The Lodge's road had been renumbered when the bypass went in years back, but the sign, like so many things in the mountains, had outlived its immediate usefulness. Tonight, something else about it nagged at her. The details were sharper. The snow on the painted man's coat seemed whiter. The green of the pine trees looked fresher somehow. The canvas had fewer tears. She watched it fade into the rear view. Fog swelled into its place. Her brakes still felt good, responsive, strong. The pedal had the same reassuring give beneath her boot. The air pressure needles sat in their proper positions, unwavering. Yet the mountain grade did not once seem to ease. The descent held steady, a long, unbroken slope that never offered the usual brief reprieves. Signs appeared at intervals, their warning cycling. Trucks check brakes. Steep grade next 10 miles. Runaway ramp ahead 3 miles. Trucks use low gear. She knew these signs. She had already seen these signs in this order on this same drop. At the edge of her hearing, the CB mutter shifted. Static thinned. A voice, quieter now, came through, as if someone sat very far away, speaking into a cupped hand. Myra. Just her name, carried on a breath. Her own hand moved before she could talk herself out of it. She lifted the mic from its clip, the coiled cord stretching, and pressed the side button. The plastic was warm from the cab, textured under her fingers. Copy, she said, her voice lower than usual. Who's calling? The reply came after a moment, not as a crackle or a burst, but as a slow bleed of sound, like something seeping through a wall. You missed it. The tone was unfamiliar and somehow intimately known all at once. Low, measured, with a slight roughness from too much coffee and not enough water. A tone she recognized from her own voice on bad nights. Missed what? She asked. Her eyes did not leave the road. The white line on the right, the center lines, the faint suggestion of guardrail posts. Her muscle memory held the truck steady while her mind slid sideways, curious and wary. The ramp, the voice said softly, you keep missing it. A small tremor of understanding, not full, not complete, but a hint of shape moved under the surface of her thoughts. The grade continued. The truck's weight pressed forward. Gravity was patient and constant. How many times? Mara asked, not sure even as she said it what she meant. How many passes down this mountain? How many runs in her logbook? Or something else entirely? There was a long pause. The CB let out a few faint pops, little pinpricks of static. We don't count that way up here, the voice said at last. Just know it's enough. The strange choice of words sat heavily in the cab. Her fingers tightened around the mic. Who are you? She asked. Silence spread out, thin but tactile, like skin stretched over a drum. Outside, the fog shifted, thinning for a barest instant. Through the translucent veil, the world opened like a flicker of film. For a heartbeat, she saw not her own headlights but another pair, just ahead on the grade. Another truck, same make, same model, same color. Same decals on the side of the cab. She saw, in that sliver of view, the subtle dent on the right fender where she'd once nudged a loading dock wall. Then the fog folded back in, and the view snapped shut. Only her own beam remained, cutting through white. The voice on the CB side, a sound at once weary and oddly tender. You're me, it said quietly. Later, earlier, doesn't really matter. We're not wired to think in how the ridge thinks. From above, if such a vantage existed, Hollow Ridge would not have looked like a single, simple pass in that moment. It would have resembled a slow, twisting braid of light, truck trails weaving over and over the same grade in loops that did not entirely agree on when, and in what order they occurred. Time, for a stretch, did something a little more elaborate than its usual straight line. Mara's heartbeat was steady but pronounced now. She could feel it in her throat, in the tips of her fingers where they curled around the mic. "I'm dreaming," she said finally. The words felt obligatory, a ritual phrase spoken when the world stepped sideways. "Maybe," the voice allowed, "but the brakes still get hot. Dreams don't do that." As if on cue, she caught the faintest whiff of warmth that did not belong to the engine, something metallic, edged with a tang of friction. Not burning, not yet, just the beginning of something the mountain had seen too often. "You're fine right now," the voice added, as if reading the direction of her thoughts. "But the ridge doesn't wait for the exact moment things go wrong. It noticed you before you did. That's what it does. It notices." Mara wet her lips with her tongue, tasting the dry air of the cab. Ahead, another sign rose, its placement uncanny in its familiarity. "Runaway ramp ahead 3 miles. "How am I supposed to find it?" she asked slowly. "If it is there when I get to where it should be." The voice gave a small, humorless chuckle that sounded like her own, when she made a joke to herself about a flat tire in the rain. "Stop looking for where it was," it said. "Look for where it wants to be now." She almost laughed at the absurdity, but something in that answer clicked against something else inside her, like 2 gears finally meshing. The mountain had not changed out of spite or malice. It simply shifted. Fog rolled. Time folded a little. The place where the safety lane split off might not line up, mile for mile, with the strip of asphalt she remembered from daytime runs. Other things repeated. The warnings, the grade, the long, punishing downward climb. These were constants. But the exit, if it was an exit at all in the way she understood, might not be. The CB hissed softly. "You'll see it," the voice added, quieter now, as if already fatting. "If you're willing to see it, that's the trick. The ridge can't grab the wheel, it can just nudge." "Have we done this before?" Mara asked, her gaze sweeping the right edge of the world, searching not for the expected widening but for anything that felt off. This exact conversation. "Yes," the voice said. "And no, think of it as practice runs. You were always stubborn." The faintest smile tugged at her mouth, in spite of the strangeness. Ahead, the fog shifted again. On the right, for a moment, the guardrail seemed to bulge outward, its line not perfectly straight anymore but bending, as if following some unseen contour just beyond the visible edge. She knew the highway's engineering well enough. There were no bulges that dramatic on the official maps. Her instincts prickled. The road itself did not change. The lane stripes continued unbroken, but the space beside them, where the shoulder should have been a narrow strip, felt subtly thicker, as if there were more room there than her eyes alone could account for. Her hand stayed loose on the wheel, but her jaw had set. "How do I know," she asked quietly, "that taking it is safer than staying on the road I can see?" The answer came without hesitation. "You don't," the voice said. "You never do, you didn't before. That's why you kept missing it." The scent of warming metal grew a touch more present, threading through the air. Her gauges still showed nothing alarming, but the knowledge burrowed in. This was a very long grade, and she was one human being making one set of choices among countless others. From outside, the truck moved with grace and caution, its descent a controlled, careful line. No one, watching from the side of the road, would have seen anything amiss. But there were no people on the side of the road, just trees and rock and fog, all of them older than painted warning signs. Mara exhaled through her nose, a single measured breath. She loosened her grip, not out of relaxation but as a conscious act. "Okay," she said softly into the CB. "Okay, then show me." No reply came, only static. Perhaps that was all the answer she was going to get. The next curve unspooled ahead of her, a wider sweep than the last. On the right, the bulge in the guardrail line became more apparent. The posts leaned inward a fraction, as though bowing to something just beyond. Past them in the fog, the darkness seemed different. Deeper, yes, but also layered, an absence of light that suggested space rather than rock. Mara's foot hovered over the brake, then slid, almost of its own volition, to the accelerator. She gave the truck a little more fuel. From above, the move looked tiny, a nearly imperceptible increase in speed. Inside the cab, it felt like a small act of trust. Climbing up a runaway ramp at too low, a speed could strand a driver in its depths, forcing them to back down through loose gravel, not an appealing prospect under the best of circumstances. Approaching it with a little more momentum, with the intent to commit, made the decision what it was meant to be. A choice to leave the familiar lane and give oneself up to a different kind of control. The white lines on the road flowed beneath her. The fog opened a fraction more, like a curtain tugged aside by reluctant hands. And there it was. Not a perfect replica of the ramp she had seen in sunlight years before, but an echo. A wide, pale tongue of gravel splitting from the right lane, angling upward into the fog, its edges defined by low ridges of earth and rock. It had no sign directly at its mouth, no neatly printed runaway ramp here arrow. It looked almost like a service road, a work lane for unseen crews. If she had been looking only for the official sign, she might have dismissed it. Her hands turned the wheel. The truck responded immediately, the sensation of weight shifting under and behind her unmistakable. The cab leaned slightly toward the ramp as the trailer began to follow. The tires hit gravel with a soft, crunching roar, different from the hum of asphalt. Resistance surged up through the frame. The grade of the ramp ran opposite the mountain's descent, an upward tilt that bit into her forward motion. She eased off the accelerator entirely. The truck surged a few more yards, then its momentum began to bleed away, drawn down into the earth through every contacting surface. The Jake brake growled briefly, then she cut it, letting the stones and slope do their work. Speed dropped 50, 40, 30. The sensation was strange, like rushing into a quiet room and feeling all sound slur and slow around you. At 20, she feathered the brake once, firmly but briefly, more as a reassurance than a necessity. The truck responded. No skidding, no sliding. The gravel held. By 10, she could have stepped out and walked beside the cab. The fog ahead was thick, but not as impenetrable as on the open road. It had a different quality here, a stillness like the air in a closed library. The truck rolled to a gentle stop. Silence stepped in, not absolute but profound. The engine idled low, almost purring. The ticking of warm metal expanding and settling punctuated the quiet. The CB hissed, a faint background exhale. Mara's hands slowly unclenched. Her head tipped back against the rest, the vinyl cool against her skin. Outside, the ramp seemed to continue up into nothing. Beyond the front bumper, mist pressed close. Yet when she peered, shapes swam faintly into possibility. Other rigs hunkered along widening shoulders of compacted stone, some old with rounded noses and faded paint, some newer models she recognized. One that looked nearly identical to her own, same lines, same company decal, parked a little uphill, angles softened by fog. A man in a reflective vest walked between two of the distant trucks, his outline blurred. Beside another, someone sat on their steps, feet dangling, a coffee steam snake swirling and vanishing into the white. Their faces, if they had faces, did not resolve. They remained impressions of companionship more than distinct people. The mountain held, them all in a gentle, graveled hand. Mara's shoulders eased further. A long breath left her, one she had not realized she'd been rationing. On the CB, the voice returned, thinner now, like a memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. "See," it murmured, "you can get off. You don't have to ride it all the way down every time." Her throat felt thick when she replied. "Are we done then?" she asked, "with this?" The pause stretched. Outside, someone's laughter floated up faintly, not wild, not nervous, just the low, tired chuckle of people who have made it far enough to breathe. We never really know when we're done, the voice said gently. We just know we're here now. That's enough. Rest. When you roll back out, it'll be the stretch you remember. Sun or stars, who knows, but you won't be stuck on this part anymore. In the omniscient view, if such a thing could be held, Hollow Ridge's loop straightened for a moment. The truck on the ramp sat not in any 1 year or hour, but in a thin place where all the times a driver had needed to pause overlapped. It was neither before nor after the runs that had led to it, but beside them. Inside the cab, Mara lowered her seat a notch. The familiar creak sounded almost ceremonial. The fog outside glowed softly, lit from no obvious source. The shapes of the other trucks remained suggestions, their massive forms gentle in stillness. No one honked. No engines revved too loud. The ramp held a hush born not of fear, but of mutual understanding. She pulled her blanket up over her legs, its weight settling across her lap like a hand. The fatigue that had edged her thoughts, physical and something deeper, rose now fully, unopposed. Mara closed her eyes. Sleep came not as a sudden drop, but as a gradual loosening, like the releasing of tension in cooling metal. Her breath deepened, steady and even, matching the low, contented idle of the engine. Time, above and below her, did whatever complicated dance it liked. The ramp did not mind. It had held many waiting trucks and would hold many more. When she woke, pale light seeped around the edges of her curtains. For a moment, she hovered in that hazy in-between where dreams and waking share a border. Then the memory of the ramp, the fog, and the voice returned, not sharp but clear enough. She pushed herself upright. The cab felt slightly cooler, the air fresher. She could hear birds faintly, a sound she hadn't noticed before. She slid out of the bunk and into the driver's seat. Outside, the fog was gone. The ramp that had felt endless in the night now stretched only a short distance ahead before ending in a sturdy line of gravel mounded against a wall of stacked tires and earth. Beyond, blue sky spread wide, streaked with thin, high clouds. The silhouettes of mountains stood in clean, sober lines. No other trucks occupied the ramp. No people walked between them. The gravel around her tires bore no obvious tracks but her own. Down below, through a gap in the roadside trees, she caught a glimpse of Route 43 continuing its descent. It looked ordinary, almost small from this vantage, just two gray lanes curling along the side of a familiar hill. She checked her gauges, all where they should be, no warning lights. The faint scent of warmed brakes had faded entirely, replaced by the crispness of morning air. Mara eased the truck into gear and crept back down the ramp. At the mouth, a proper sign stood, runaway truck ramp, black letters on white. The post was straight. A little reflector winked in the sun. She merged gently back onto the highway. Traffic had picked up. In the distance, a line of cars made their way up the opposite side, sunlight glinting from windshields. A pickup approached from behind in her lane, maintaining a respectful distance. A mile marker slipped past. Mile 12. The grade evened out gradually over the next few miles, each curve a little less sharp, each dip a little shallower. The mountain's grip loosened without drama. On the CB, voices chattered lightly now. Discussions of weather, a mention of a police cruiser near mile 30, someone rating a diner's coffee as not terrible with grudging approval. Ordinary road talk. Mara listened, the familiar sound washing through the cab like the noted return of a favorite song after an odd, quiet interlude. The voice from the fog did not come again. Yet every time she ran Hollow Ridge in the months and years that followed, a new habit grew. At the first warning sign, she'd check her brakes a little more deliberately than she might have otherwise. At the mention of the runaway ramp ahead, she'd scan not only for the official split, but for any place where the world seemed to bulge unexpectedly, making room. She never found the strange ramp again the way she had that night, endless, fog-wrapped, filled with shadows of other rigs paused beside her in some sideways pocket of time. What she did find, over and over, was the quiet knowledge that she didn't have to ride every danger point all the way out, teeth gritted, insisting on staying in one narrow lane simply because it was marked. There were always, somewhere, exits, unmapped perhaps, unexpected, created in the instant someone needed them and was willing to look away from the painted lines to see where the world had made space. And on nights when fog settled heavy over the ridge once more, if she listened very closely to the hum of her own engine and the faint hiss of the CB, she could almost hear another version of herself somewhere nearby on that twisting braid of time, making the same decision to trust an unseen upward turn in the gravel. Story number 3. On most nights, Interstate 29 out on the plains felt like a straight line drawn with a ruler across a sleeping world. Flat land on either side, fields that went on, their edges only guessed at in the dark, occasional clusters of lights where a town huddled around a single overpass, long stretches where the only moving thing for miles was a truck and the slow, distant spin of wind turbines out on the horizon. Fog didn't usually belong out here, not the thick, clinging kind. That was for river bottoms and mountainsides, for low places and forested valleys. But tonight it had come anyway. Joel noticed it first as a softness around the distant farm lights, their sharp points blurring into little halos. Then it thickened at ground level, rising from the ditches in pale, hesitant ribbons that the headlights chewed through and left trailing behind like torn cloth. In the cab, the air was warm and dry. The soft, old fabric of the seat creaked when he shifted his weight, molded by years to the shape of his shoulders. The dashboard's familiar glow washed over his hands as they rested on the wheel, gentle greens and ambers, nothing too bright to tire the eyes. The engine hummed steadily, a deep, comforting vibration beneath him. His flatbed trailer rolled quiet and obedient behind, its load tightly chained under a dark tarp. The CB radio murmured low, ghosts of voices far out of range. A song played softly from the speakers, some older tune with a slow beat and a steel guitar that matched the rhythm of the tires. Fog spilled more boldly across the road now. Joel dimmed his high beams. The white wall ahead of him pulled closer as if offended by the extra light. Low beams settled it into something workable, a bright tunnel that showed him 200 feet of future at a time. Enough. On the right, a green overhead sign materialized suddenly out of the gray, its reflective face almost glowing. Way station 12 miles. Mandatory 4 commercial vehicles. The words passed through him without concern. He knew this station. Exit 143. Most nights after 10 it was closed. A big, simple closed sign swung over the lane and trucks rolled by without a second thought. It had been a long day. He had started before dawn in another state entirely, and now he was thousands of pounds lighter and many hundreds of miles farther along. His logbook was tidy. His hours were legal. His body had that hollow, transparent feeling that came toward the end of a run, tired but not yet aching. He planned to push on just a little further before shutting down. The wipers whispered over the windshield. Swish, swish, beads of water gathering and sliding away. The world narrowed further. Out on the plains, the sky usually felt huge, even at night. Tonight it was low and pressing, a lid of blurred gray that reflected his own headlights back at him. The faint orange glow of distant town lights bled into the mist, smearing into the horizon. Joel took a sip from his travel mug. The coffee had gone lukewarm, the flavor flattened into something a little like cardboard and a little like memory. He drank it anyway, more for the ritual than the taste. Miles slipped past without much to mark them, the quiet numbers on the odometer turning over. The periodic green reassurance of reflector posts on the shoulder. A solitary farmhouse light floating briefly on the right before it vanished into the blind air. The next sign came sooner than he expected, the fog making distance deceptive. Way station 1 mile. Open. The word open was lit with little white bulbs, fuzzy-edged in the mist. Joel frowned slightly, more in thought than in displeasure. Late for them to be open, but not impossible. Sometimes enforcement did a night shift, catching drivers who thought they could skate by after hours. He checked his speed, well within the limit. He glanced at his gauges, everything where it should be. Nothing to worry about, just one more small interruption. The outline of the way station appeared ahead, softened and enlarged by the fog. A low, squat building of pale brick and concrete, a tall metal gantry over the incoming lane, glowing red and green signals set into it like traffic lights. The official vehicle's only exit ramp yawned to the right, its white lines gleaming in his headlights. Joel flicked on his turn signal, the click-click-click in the cab syncopated with the soft sweep of the wipers. He rolled gracefully off the interstate, the faint change in pavement sound telegraphing the shift from mainline to access road, just a slightly different pitch, a slightly different kind of vibration. The fog seemed to thicken around the station, drawn as if to a magnet. The lot lights atop tall poles cast wide cones of diffuse, glowing haze, each one a little island of brightness in which the world took on soft edges. No other trucks sat in the staging area. The scale lane ahead shone slick and black, the metal plates in the pavement invisible but felt, somehow, like the grain of wood beneath a tablecloth. A red light burned over the approach. Joel eased to a crawl and stopped with his bumper at the marked line, the word scale painted large and white on the asphalt just ahead. For a moment, everything was still. The engine idled. The little cooling fan in the dash gave a faint plastic whir. The fog pressed its pale face against the windshield and held it there, breathing slowly. Then the loudspeaker crackled. "Bring it on up, driver," a voice said. It was calm, unhurried. There was no bark of command in it, just a kind of resigned gentleness, as if the speaker had said these same words to many, many trucks and would say them to many more. Joel eased forward. The truck rolled up onto the unseen plates, a faint, almost subliminal shudder running through the frame as the weight settled on the scale. The red light stayed, read a heartbeat longer than seemed necessary. He watched the digital display mounted on a post outside his window. Its red numbers blinked alive, digits flickering as the load registered. 42160, 42980, 43,020. The count steadied and held. For a split second, though, before it locked, the numbers flashed much higher. 92,700. Joel blinked. The display settled on the realistic weight, calm and steady. If the earlier figure had been real, his axles would be groaning, the suspension complaining. They weren't. The truck felt as it always did, solid but not overloaded. Probably a glitch, he told himself. Damp electronics, fog finding its way into everything. The light over the lane snapped to green. He rolled forward slowly. Instead of the expected arrow pointing him back onto the interstate, a sign ahead read, "Trucks to inspection, 5 mph. An arrow directed him around the side of the building. Joel's brow ticked another small notch downward, not unheard of. They did random checks now and then. Lights, logbooks, manifests. He kept everything in order precisely to avoid this being more than a brief annoyance. He followed the lane around, the concrete curb on the left and a grassy strip on the right barely visible in the milky light. The building wall slid past, a bland expanse of beige block dotted with a few narrow windows, their blinds half drawn. The inspection area opened up as a wide, covered bay with high clearance, open on both ends. Tonight it was empty. Fluorescent tubes hummed along the ceiling, their light merging with the fog in a soft, humming blur. A sign at the entrance instructed, "Stop here. Set brake. Proceed inside with papers." He brought the rig to a halt. The parking brake hissed and clunked as he said it. The sudden absence of motion made the cab feel larger and smaller, all at once. He sat for a moment, listening. Beyond the engine's idle, there was only the faint, constant hum of the building, the whisper of fog moving around hard corners. Joel reached for his worn leather folder, thick with neatly arranged paperwork. Bill of lading, registration, insurance, logs, inspection reports. The plastic sleeves crinkled softly as he closed the folder and tucked it under one arm. The moment he opened the door, cool, damp air slid in, heavier than the air in the cab, scented faintly with wet concrete and distant exhaust. It wrapped around his face and hands like a wet cloth. He climbed down from the cab, boots hitting the ground with a dull, reassuring thump. The fog in the bay was thinner, held at bay somewhat by the roof and the wall's mass, but it still hung like breath in cold air, visible and persistent. The office door was a glass rectangle set into the building wall, framed in metal. A fluorescent light buzzed behind it, making the pane glimmer. On the glass, white vinyl letters spelled out. Way Station, District 7. HORS, open as needed. The handle was cool under his palm. When he pulled the door open, it gave with a slight rubbery resistance, as if the seal hadn't been disturbed in some time, though faint scuffs on the threshold suggested otherwise. Inside, the air changed. Warmer, with the dry, slightly scorched smell of old coffee sitting on a hot plate, the scent of photocopier toner, a hint of dust and something like floor cleaner, lemony and worn. The floor was covered in speckled linoleum, yellowed slightly with age. A scuffed path showed where countless boots had walked the same route, in from the door up to the counter, over to the bulletin board by the benches. Fluorescent tubes hummed overhead, harsh but not flickering. Their light flattened colors made everything a little paler than it might have been by day. A long counter cut the room in half, topped with scratched laminate. Behind it, a sliding panel of cloudy glass separated the public area from the interior office space. A narrow gap at the bottom allowed for the passing of paperwork. Someone sat there behind the glass. Joel could see the suggestion of a person, a shoulder, a shape of head, but the lighting back there put their face in shadow. Their hands were visible, though, resting lightly on the counter edge. Broad palms, fingers curled loosely, nails clean and short. A faded denim shirt cuff. The faint, uneven glint of a simple wedding band. "Even in," the person said. The voice sounded older than his own, but not by much. Worn smooth by repetition. Not unfriendly. Not warm exactly, but containing no edge. Joel stepped up to the counter and set his folder down in the gap. The plastic edges made a soft, sliding sound. "Got pulled around for inspection," he said. His own voice sounded slightly muffled in the room, cushioned by the hum of the lights and the gentle drone of unseen equipment. "Paperwork's all in order." A hand reached out, pulled the folder through. "You're Joel Anders," the person observed, not really asking. "Out of Kansas City, running east." Joel watched the top of the folder as the hands flipped it open. Maniacally neat rows of text and numbers, his own precise block capitals in the logbook, scanned in quick, practice sweeps. "That's me," he said. "Load steel beams, 3 stops tomorrow." A clock hung on the wall behind the glass. Its plastic frame was the color of old bone. The second hand ticked around in tiny, precise jerks. The time it showed made his stomach do a small, inexplicable dip. 4:17. He glanced at his watch. 1:03. The discrepancy was absurd, easily explained. A dead clock never adjusted. Office clocks fell behind all the time. People forgot to wind them, change batteries. He had seen this 1,000 times. But the second hand was ticking. He watched it move, one notch then another, smooth, merciless. The figure behind the glass didn't look at it. "How are you feeling?" the voice asked calmly, pen scratching on paper. Straightforward question, driver, tired. "Fine," Joel said automatically. Then after a small pause, a more honest, tired enough. The hands paused for a second over his logbook. The head behind the glass tilted in a way that suggested the person was looking not at the ink but through it. "You've been in the fog for a bit," the voice said. "It gets longer than the miles say. You know how that goes." Joel did know. Fatigue wasn't only about hours. It was about effort, about how much of your mind you had to hold on a narrow, bright tunnel of road, how much you had to do without landmarks when the world flattened out. "How's the patch up ahead?" he asked. "Any pileups, black ice?" "Nothing like that," the voice replied. "Just more of the same. Hard to tell where you are, hard to tell how far you've come. Some drivers blow past their exits. Some swear the same overpass keeps showing up over and over." The pen resumed its scratching. It moved slowly now, more deliberate. Joel shifted his weight. The floor murmured faintly under his boots. "Logs look clean," the voice said. "Equipment up to date. You run a tidy outfit." "Try to," Joel replied. "Makes nights like this easier if nothing else." An object slid out under the glass, his folder, with a new sheet tucked on top. A short, printed inspection form with empty boxes and signature lines. "Sign there," the voice instructed, a fingertip tapping a line. The nail was square, the skin along the edges faintly rough from work. Joel noticed a small white scar across the knuckle, familiar in shape to one on his own right hand. He picked up the plastic pen on a string and signed. His name looked odd to him for a second, slightly foreign. The clock behind the glass ticked over to 4:18. "What's with the time?" Joel asked casually. "You folks jump ahead 3 hours in here." A soft sound behind the glass. Not quite a chuckle, not quite a sigh. "We work on a different clock," the voice said. Joel waited, one eyebrow tilting up, expecting elaboration. Instead, the pen tapped gently against the desk again. "You can roll back out if you like," the voice said. "Paperwork's clean, no holds, but you might want to think about taking a spell in the lot first." "I'm within my hours," Joel said. "Got time left to make a dent in the next stretch." "On paper, sure," the voice agreed mildly. "But that fog out there doesn't care about your logbook. It stretches things, makes an hour feel like 3. You know how you came in here thinking it was around 1. Joel's shoulders tensed a fraction. "Because it is around 1, he said. The person behind the glass turned a little, just enough that the overhead light caught the edge of their cheek. Not enough for a full face, just a suggestion of lines, of an expression that might have been knowing or might have been nothing at all. "Not for you," they said gently. "Not quite. Sit a bit. Use the lounge. The road will be there when you're ready to see it straight again." Joel hesitated. He considered the feel of his own body, the heaviness in his eyes he'd been ignoring, the stiffness in his shoulders, the hollow space right behind his forehead that filled in on long runs with a kind of quiet buzzing. He thought about the fog swallowing exits, time stretching, the truck weighing nearly twice what it should for one fraction of a second on the outside display. "Is it always open," he asked slowly, "when it's like this?" "Only when it needs to be," the voice said. "You're not the first to roll in out of that soup. Won't be the last. Lot, there. Recliners. Coffee that's not good but not terrible. Stay as long as you need to feel like your own feet are under you again." The word always hung in his mind, but he did not press it. He took his folder back. The plastic felt faintly warmer where the other person's hands had been. The new inspection sheet bore his signature in fresh ink, and a time stamp printed neatly in one corner. 4:17 a.m. The printer must have been wrong, he thought. Me set, no big deal. Yet when he tucked the paper into the stack, it seemed to nestle into a place that had already been worn to its shape, as if it had sat there for years. "Lounge is down the hall, left at the end," the voice said. "Lights'll dim a bit. They know when someone needs to shut their eyes." He almost asked they. Instead, he nodded once, a short habitual motion, and turned toward the hallway. The corridor ran narrow and plain, the walls painted in that particular government tissue beige that somehow managed to look both clean and perpetually tired. Bulletin boards lined one side, pinned with sheets of paper, regulations, reminders, local notices. A yellowed poster about winter driving safety. A flyer for a driver appreciation barbecue long past, the date from 3 summers ago. A checklist for pre-trip inspections, corners curling. One sheet caught his eye without quite knowing why. It was a photocopy of a hand-drawn map, sketched in thin, neat lines. Interstate 29 curling across the page, little circles where towns sat, tiny X marks at rest areas and wide shoulders safe for parking. A thicker ring around one spot labeled simply, Fog Belt. In the margin, in small, precise block letters, someone had written, "Stop before this feels normal." The handwriting was eerily similar to his own. He reached out, almost without thinking, and brushed his fingertips against the paper. The pushpins holding it in place were old and discolored, as if the map had been there for years. He continued down the hall. The lounge door opened without resistance. Inside, the light was softer, lamps instead of fluorescents, casting pools of warmth on faded couches and a couple of well-worn recliners. A vending machine hummed quietly in one corner, its glass front displaying rows of snacks. A small TV in the corner showed some muted late-night program. The volume had been turned down to a faint murmur, more presence than content. No one else occupied the room. Joel stood for a moment on the threshold, listening. The fog outside was only a distant perception now, a sense of white pressing against the building's skin. In here, time felt oddly suspended, stretched like taffy. He sat in one of the recliners, the cushions sighed, accepting his weight. The fake leather was cracked in places but clean. When he leaned back, the footrest popped up with a soft, mechanical protest and then held. His body, which had been soldiering on without complaint, now began to make its small protests known, the ache in the lower back, the slight throb in his calves, the heaviness in the back of his neck. On a low table beside the recliner lay a small stack of magazines and a few outdated highway atlases. The top atlas was open to a map of this very stretch of interstate. Someone had circled the way station in blue pen. Joel's eyes moved from the circled spot to the sweeping line of highway beyond, to the fog belt and the faint suggestion of exits and towns he'd been planning to pass that night. The route looked suddenly longer than he'd pictured. The chair's warmth seeped up into him. The muffled hum of the vending machine, the soft drone of the distant television, the faint vibration of something large moving far away, another truck passing outside, perhaps, all combined into a kind of lullaby. His eyelids lowered without him, deciding they would. Sleep did not fall on him like a stone. It slipped under him quietly, like a slow incoming tide, lifting and carrying him out. Time, out in the fog, did whatever elastic tricks it liked. The interstate rolled its long gray ribbon on, unwatched. In the lounge, his breathing settled into a slow, even pattern. Hours later, or minutes, or some interval that did not fit neatly into ordinary units, Joel stirred. The room was dimmer. The TV screen showed a screensaver, colored shapes floating aimlessly. The vending machine's hum remained, but the overall tone of the building had shifted. The hum of busier machinery had faded, leaving only the foundational sounds. He sat up. His body felt different, looser but clearer, as if a knot he hadn't known he was carrying behind his chest had been gently worked open. He checked his watch. 4:17. He frowned slightly, then looked up at the lounge's wall clock. 4:17. He left the lounge and walked back down the hallway. The bulletin boards watched him pass, their papers unchanged. The hand-drawn map still hung where it had been, edges curling just a little more. At the office window, the lights were lower. The fluorescent still hummed, but a few had been switched off or dimmed, pools of brightness smaller now. No one sat behind the glass. The counter was clear, no pen in sight. His folder was no longer on the desk. He assumed he'd brought it with him unconsciously, and when he checked his hand, there it was, tucked under his arm. The door to the office area, beyond the glass, was closed. The clock on the wall read 4:17. Its second hand ticked. Joel lingered a moment, as if expecting the chair behind the glass to creak, a figure to lean forward out of shadow and give him one last reminder, one last gentle admonition. Nothing happened. Outside, as he stepped back into the covered bay, the change in the air was immediate. The heaviness had lifted. The fog, though still present, had thinned. He could see the shape of the interstate through the open end of the bay, the low ribbon of it stretching away under a sky that now had a hint of color along the horizon, blue and the faintest touch of rose. He climbed back into the cab. The seat welcomed him with its familiar creak. The dash lights seemed a little less harsh, though he knew they hadn't changed. On the dash, beneath the CB, lay a paper he did not remember placing there. It was a weight ticket, printed neatly with the state's crest at the top, the station's name, his truck's VIN, and the gross weight, 43,020 pounds. The time stamped at the bottom read, 4:17 a.m. Beneath the printed lines, in small, careful block letters, someone had written, "Hold steady in the fog." The handwriting was indistinguishable from his own. He sat there for a long moment, the engine idling gently, the paper light between his fingers. From above, if anyone had been able to see in all directions at once, the way station would have looked unremarkable, a small compound of concrete and steel, and light off the side of a long, thin road, fog curling around its edges like a cat around an ankle. Trucks passed it by at all hours, some slowing, some rolling on. Some turned in when the open sign glowed through the mist, finding there a room with tired chairs and a clock that did not quite agree with the rest of the world. Back on the interstate, Joel guided his rig up the on-ramp and merged smoothly into the eastbound lane. The fog ahead lay in gentler sheets now, no longer a solid wall, but a series of veils the truck slipped through one by one. Signs emerged and vanished, town names he recognized. Exits he had been intending to blow past now felt more real, more anchored. On the CB, chatter picked up, the easy banter of drivers sharing weather and warnings, and the occasional recommendation for a place with decent pie. Joel listened, one hand resting light on the wheel. The way station fell behind him, shrinking in the mirror until the fog took it again. Over the years, he would pass that stretch many times. Some nights in clear weather, the station would sit dark and closed, its signs unlit, the bay empty. He would roll by and barely notice. But on other nights, when the fog thickened over the plains and exits blurred, when he found himself counting the same reflector posts twice and feeling time pull like taffy, the white word open would glow faintly through the gray. He would turn in, more quickly each time, the lanes and doors and worn recliners growing familiar in a way he could not quite explain to anyone who had never been there. Not every station weighed, only steel and rubber and diesel. Some, tucked away in the quieter parts of the map, seemed to measure something else as well, the precise moment when a driver should not be trusted to say, "I'm fine," and have it believed. Story number 4. On clear days, Highway 6 traced the edge of the lake like a careful hand, following the rim of a bowl. To the right, dark water, usually calm, sometimes choppy, stretching farther than the eye could see, an inland sea pretending to be an ocean. To the left, low bluffs, stands of pine and birch, the occasional narrow road leading back toward small towns tucked out of sight. At night, on most nights, it was a simple, lonely, beautiful route. The kind of drive where a person could set the cruise, rest an elbow on the window ledge, and let the steady rush of asphalt and the distant glimmer of lighthouses settle into something close to peace. Tonight, the water had disappeared. The fog had come in off the lake on silent feet hours earlier, moving in slow, deliberate layers, soundless but insistent. First, it softened the line between sky and dark surface. Then it rose, climbing the rocky shore, spilling across the highway like pale smoke. Now it pressed itself against Lena's windshield in a dense, luminous curtain. The world ended 20 yards ahead of her bumper. Inside the cab, it was warm and faintly scented. Coffee in the thermos holder cooling toward lukewarm, a hint of old cigarette smoke embedded forever in the upholstery from some previous owner, the plasticky smell of dashboard and steering wheel warmed by the vents. Lena's hand sat easy but watchful at 10 and 2 on the wheel. She had that specific kind of attention hold people learned only by spending long hours in darkened cabs, relaxed from the shoulders down, wired somewhere behind the eyes. Her truck, a boxy, dependable day cab with sleeper, hummed beneath her. The engine note said everything was fine. No complaint, no strain, just the steady work of moving weight along a damp two-lane. Her trailer was full tonight, floor-to-ceiling pallets of dry goods, nothing delicate, nothing that would complain as long as it arrived within a reasonable time frame. The road ahead curled gently to the right. She could tell from the faint angle of the painted lines more than from the landscape itself. The fog erased everything past the reach of her low beams. The right side guardrail appeared, gleaming damply, then vanished in the same movement. She could hear the lake, though. Even with the windows closed, even with the radio low, the sound found its way in. A dull, restless booming somewhere beyond the veil of white. Not waves on a beach, not the small lap of water on sand, but a deeper churn. The way large water moves when wind and distance give it enough room to push. The CB murmured with the low, almost companionable hiss of static. The usual chatter had died down as the night thickened. Most people knew better than to jabber their way through a patch of road like this. Lena's wipers brushed across the glass, back and forth in a rhythm that became part of the cab's heartbeat. Swish, tick, swish, tick. Tiny droplets raced each other down the outside of the side windows in erratic paths. A green sign rose out of the brightness on the right, its letters sharp and close. Mile 87. She'd been counting. Another 9 miles to the little town of Red Harbor, where Highway 6 bent inland and the lakefront portion of the run eased. There was a big, bright truck stop there with modern pumps and a greasy spoon that stayed open 24 hours in the summer. She could make it that far. The clock on the dash said she didn't have to, but she had the hours if she wanted them. The road ahead narrowed just for a moment. The right side white line leaned in. The guardrail came closer, its posts slick and dark. Lena instinctively nudged the wheel left a fraction, giving herself a little more breathing room. Out there in the blankness, beyond that thin band of metal, the land dropped away. She knew that from daylight runs, rock ledges, a narrow, stony beach, then deep water that turned black in bad weather. Her phone, plugged into the dash, showed a familiar map in miniature. The little arrow of her truck crept along a thin gray line, the lake a blue void to the right. Cell service had come and gone along this stretch before. Tonight, to her mild surprise, the bars still glowed at the top of the screen. Messages would buzz in now and then. Dispatch notifications, a picture from a niece, a promotion for a chain restaurant 3 states away. But she left the phone alone, eyes on the road, 200 feet of future at a time. Another sign resolved at the edge of her vision, then entered it fully. CURVES next 5 miles. Use caution. As it slid past her window, a smaller, square sign piggybacked on its post came briefly into view. Fog area lights on. Someone years ago had added a little sticker beneath it, a smiling cartoon lighthouse. The sticker had faded to a ghost of itself, colors washed away. Only the outline remained. Lena smiled faintly. Someone at the department had a sense of humor. The radio, tuned to a late-night AM station out of some distant city, played an old song under the fuzz. Piano, soft. A singer whose voice had followed long-haul drivers across decades. Outside, the fog grew, if anything, thicker. It glowed in her headlights, bright and near, eating sound as much as it reflected it. The world beyond her cab might have ended. There was no way to tell. She took comfort in the consistency of the rest, the hum of the engine, the little movements of the trailer as it followed gentle bends, the soft rattle somewhere inside the dashboard that appeared only over joins in the pavement. She passed another marker. Mile 88. A minute later, another. Mile 87. Lena's hands tightened, just a little on the wheel. She blinked once, a slow, deliberate blink, and checked her mirrors. The lakeside mirror showed only the pale blur of fog, broken faintly by the rhythm of her trailer's red marker lights. The driver's side mirror reflected nothing but the white tunnel and the slick gleam of her own side panel. Her eyes dropped to the odometer. The numbers rolled upward at the expected rate, matching her speed. No jump. No stutter. She looked back out, watched the line of the right-hand shoulder, the narrow strip of asphalt, the occasional reflectors, everything exactly where it should be. The next sign appeared, its letters wet and clear in the light. CURVES next 5 miles. Use caution. Fog area lights on. The tiny lighthouse sticker, colorless ghost, watched her pass again. She had not turned around. Her steering wheel had not moved more than an inch in either direction. The trailer tracks, if anyone could see them, would show one continuous, forward-moving path. Yet here she was, back at a sign she had already gone by, back 2 miles on a road that was supposed to go only forward. From above, with the lake hidden under a lid of rolling white, and the road a thin, glowing thread along its edge, it might have looked as though a small truck had been caught in a loop of light, circling, without changing its position against the shore. Inside the cab, Lena's breath stayed steady. She felt it in her chest, in the slight fog it raised on the side window when she turned her head. She was not a panicker by nature. But she listened a little more keenly now. The CB, quiet for long minutes, stirred. "Anyone else stuck in the soup out by the lake?" a voice asked, hushed by distance and static. Lena hesitated, then reached for her mic. The cord uncoiled with a familiar little tug. "Copy that," she said, her voice low but clear. "Westbound on 6, heavy fog, feels like driving through cotton." "Yeah," the other voice said after a moment. You hit that curved sign yet?" "Twice," Lena said, before she could talk herself into some softer version. "Same little lighthouse sticker. Something's up." There was a pause long enough that she checked the speaker to make sure the CB hadn't cut out. "Yeah," the voice said quietly, "that'll happen." It was a man's voice, middle-aged by the sound of it. Something in the cadence told her he had been at this longer than she had. Familiar with the late hours, the particular way the world unspooled when tired eyes met empty roads. "That'll happen," she repeated. "On what, a regular Tuesday night?" A soft exhale, not quite a laugh. "Only in weather like this," the voice said. "Out here, it folds on itself, kind of. Don't ask me how. Sometimes the curves and the miles get slippery." Lena watched the right-hand line carefully. She could feel the faint, constant push of the lake wind, shoving damp air against the side of the trailer. Her tires made a sound like a soft whisper over wet pavement. "You stuck too?" she asked. "Not this time," the man said. "Done my loops, I'm at Harbor Lights." The name meant nothing to her. "Harbor Lights," she repeated, "out on 6. Mile 90, give or take when the weather's feelin' kind," he said. "Old truck stop, food, coffee, good coffee if you can believe that. Lights cut right through this mess. You'll see it when you need it." Lena frowned. She knew this stretch of road. Harbor Lights was not on her mental map. She had fuel planned this run carefully. Nothing out here between the last truck stop and Red Harbor but a couple of tiny mom-and-pop gas pumps set back from the road. "You sure you're on 6?" she asked. "Not 48 or the old spur?" "Pretty sure," the voice said, a touch of wry patience in it. "Been sitting here watching folks roll in and out of this fog for, well, a while." Static scratched lightly between words. "You got enough fuel to wander," he added. "Or are you married to making Red Harbor tonight?" "I'm fine on fuel," she said. "Ours too. Just not excited about playing merry-go-round on this cliff road all night." "Then keep your eyes peeled on the right," he said. "Harbor Lights doesn't show itself unless it thinks you're gonna use it. If you see the lighthouse sticker a third time, you're about due." The CB crackled once more, then fell back to its soft mutter. Outside, the lake boomed again, a little louder now. In her mind's eye, Lena pictured waves hitting rock, fanning out into froth that no one could see. She didn't like the idea of a road folding on itself. There was something too close to childhood nightmares about it, walking down a hallway and ending up back at the same door over and over. But she also couldn't deny what she had seen. Mile 87, the curved sign, the sticker, twice now without turning around. She drove on. The truck held steady. The world remained small. The next green marker appeared, mile 88. She eyed it as it slipped by, as if daring it to offer some alternative number. The curved sign did not come immediately after. Instead, a patch of open roadside emerged on the left, a narrow gravel pull-off with a lone trash barrel chained to a post. Beyond it, faint even in the fog, the silhouettes of a few picnic tables. She did not remember a formal scenic overlook there. But then, she had mostly driven this stretch in daylight when the fog burned off by noon. This might have been here all along, part of some older idea of road watching the lake. As her trailer cleared the pull-off, a glow bloomed ahead on the right. Not the hard, white glare of oncoming headlights, not the small, tight points of pier lights. This was softer, lower, sodium vapor orange and warm yellow layered like multiple sources gathered in the same area. The fog, so hungry for light, grabbed it eagerly and spread it, smearing it into a hazy halo that rose above the guardrail. Lena's muscles loosened a fraction. She rounded a gentle bend, and Harbor Lights appeared. It sat on a wide shelf cut into the bluff between the road and the drop to the unseen water. A broad apron of cracked asphalt spread out from the highway, rimmed by a stout guardrail on the lakeside. A low building, long and rectangular, huddled at the back of the lot, brick along the bottom, windows along the top, a peaked roof with a row of small dormers. Over the front entrance, a tall sign rose on two steel poles. Harbor Lights truck stop, the letters spelled, though the U had been half burned out so that it glowed weakly. Above the words, a neon outline of a lighthouse flickered, its beam, rendered in curved tubes of pale white, swung back and forth in a slow, repetitive arc. The fog toyed with the light, making the beam seem to leap and then fade. But even so, the sign's presence felt solid, anchored. "Didn't expect that," Lena murmured. She blinked at the spelling, Harbour, with a U not the way anything within 3 states of here usually wrote it. In spite of that, or because of it, the sight filled her with a strange, immediate sense of not safety, exactly, but reprieve, like spotting a familiar gas station sign after a long, empty stretch. Her turn signal clicked loud in the cab as she eased right. The apron's entrance was wide, the paint on its edge worn almost entirely away by time and tires. The truck rolled off the highway's narrow ribbon onto a generous spread of cracked blacktop. The difference in feeling was immediate. On the highway, the truck had barely room to doubt. The white lines had held it tightly. Out here, space opened. The fog parted a little, retreating to the edges of the lot as if held respectfully at a distance by the cones of light from tall poles. Several rigs were already parked along the back edge of the lot. They sat in a loose row, noses pointing toward the guardrail. Some looked old, rounded hoods, faded company names for outfits Lena had only ever heard about in stories. Some were newer but not brand new. Their paint jobs bore the patina of long use. The lot lights silvered their roofs, glinted off chrome, made soft shadows underneath their frames. None of them idled. No exhaust plumes puffed into the cold air. Their running lights were off, yet they did not feel abandoned. They felt resting. Lena eased her truck between two empty spaces, lined faintly on the ground. The asphalt crunched under her tires, a few loose stones, maybe some ancient bits of broken bottle. She set the brake. The truck rocked forward and settled. When she cut the engine, silence poured in. Not complete silence. There was always sound, even here. The low roar of the invisible lake below. The occasional hiss of wind sliding through unseen branches. The distant thump of what might have been waves on pilings. But the constant hum and vibration of the moving truck were gone. The world in the cab expanded into that quiet. Lena sat for a moment, hands loose in her lap, eyes wandering over the row of sleeping rigs in her mirrors. On one trailer nearest the end of the row, a logo she recognized from old photos, an outfit that had gone under years before. On another, a name she didn't know printed in a font that looked decidedly from another decade. She unbuckled her belt, the click sounding unusually loud. The seat gave its familiar little sigh as she shifted. Cold, damp air met her when she opened the door. It wrapped around her throat and hands, finding that patch of skin at the nape of her neck her jacket didn't quite cover. Her breath hung white for a second when she exhaled. The lot smelled of wet asphalt and faint diesel, with an underlying tang of cold, clean water. Harbor Lights building glowed softly ahead, its windows throwing warm rectangles onto the pavement. Through the glass, she caught hints of a counter, booths, a few figures moving. Her boots thudded on the blacktop as she crossed the lot. The fog hugged the ground here in pockets, little low-lying swirls that eddied around her ankles. Up close, the building's details resolved more clearly. The brick was old but well kept, mortar lines neat. The glass in the windows bore the slight wavery imperfections of panes cut and set long before double panes became standard. A neon open sign flickered in one window, the letters glowing an inviting red. The front door was a heavy, metal-framed glass rectangle. On it, painted by hand in white script starting to chip at the edges, were the words, "Welcome DRIVRS. Park as long as you need." Lena's hand touched the cool metal handle. The door pushed inward with a small whoosh, the air inside warmer and scented. Coffee, griddle, fried onions, old wood polished many times. The interior was a diner, roughly the shape she expected, but a little snugger, a little softer at the edges. Booths lined the front windows, their vinyl seats in muted shades of maroon and cream. A long counter ran down one side, with round stools bolted to the floor, each topped with a worn cushion that had seen better days but still held a little spring. The lighting was mercifully low, no harsh fluorescence. Instead, domed pendants hung every few feet, their light mellow and yellow, catching steam rising from mugs on the counter. A jukebox sat in the corner, the old kind with visible song tags behind glass. A faint tune drifted from it now, something slow from the 70s maybe, its volume just enough to fill the spaces between the clink of cutlery and murmur of voices. There were other drivers inside. At a booth near the back, a big man in a flannel shirt cradled a mug in both hands, talking in low tones to someone across from him, whose features Lena couldn't quite make out around the napkin dispenser. Along the counter, two figures sat a few stools apart, one in a faded ball cap with a logo she couldn't place, the other with long silver hair tied back at the nape of their neck. Their faces were ordinary, tired, lined, some younger, some older, but they all shared a particular look in their eyes, a kind of inward focus she recognized from truck stop mirrors in the small hours, the gaze of people who had driven long stretches of dark. Behind the counter stood a woman with a coffee pot in one hand and a dish towel slung over her shoulder. She looked like she belonged to no particular time period and to all of them. Her hair was pulled back into a bun at the nape of her neck, streaks of gray at the temples. The apron tied around her waist was crisp and white, but the edges were softened from washing. Her face was lined in a way that came from smiling more than frowning. When Lena stepped inside, the woman's gaze flicked up immediately. "Evenin'," she said, "fog bring you in." Her voice was gentle, threaded with a warmth that seemed to have nothing forced in it. "Something like that," Lena replied, letting the door ease shut behind her. The latch clicked with a soft, final sound. "Didn't think anything out here was open this late." "We're open when we're needed," the woman said simply, as if reciting policy. She nodded toward an empty stool midway down the counter. "Take a seat, sweetheart. Warm up a bit before you head back out into that soup." Lena slid onto the indicated stool. The cushion gave under her, then held. From here, she could see the coffee pots lined up on their warmers, the glass cake stands with their domes, one holding a half-moon of pie, another empty. "What can I get you?" the woman asked, reaching for a mug. "Coffee's good," Lena said. "Whatever you've got on the fresher side of old." The woman smiled, a small, approving crinkle at the corners of her eyes. "No burnt-bottom stuff here," she said. "We don't hold on to anything past its welcome. Black." "Please," Lena said, "and maybe eggs, toast, whatever's easy." "Easy's a specialty," the woman replied, already moving toward the griddle. "Name me, by the way." "Lena," she said. "Figured," me said over her shoulder. "You've got the look of a Lena." The comment was so odd and so casually delivered that Lena almost laughed. Instead, she wrapped her hands around the mug as me filled it. The ceramic was pleasantly hot, heat seeping into her fingers. Steam rose in a thin ribbon. The coffee smelled good, not truck stop bitter, not burned. Slightly nutty with a hint of something she couldn't place, cinnamon, maybe, or just well-seasoned equipment. She took a sip. It was strong and smooth. Her shoulders lowered a fraction of an inch. From this vantage, she could see more of the other patrons. The man in the flannel shirt had heavy eyelids but a soft, small smile as his booth companion spoke. The silver-haired driver at the far stool stared not at the TV in the corner or the menu board, but at their own hands, as if reacquainting themselves with them. The TVs above the counter were on, but the sound was low and indistinct. One showed a weather radar, swirls of green and yellow over an abstracted map. The timestamp in the corner was blurred, as if the camera had been out of focus for that part. "You've been looping?" me asked casually as she cracked eggs onto the hot griddle. The sizzle mingled with the hum of the room. "Looping," Lena repeated. "Back and forth over the same few miles," me said. "Fog does that out here. You're not the first to wander in after passing that silly lighthouse sticker more times than your patience allows." Lena glanced toward the windows. The neon lighthouse outside swept its beam in slow arcs, illuminating the drifting fog. "Yeah," she admitted. "Felt like I saw the same sign twice, maybe 3 times if I hadn't pulled in here." Me said. "Road gets tired same as people. Sometimes it doubles back on itself to catch its breath." The explanation was nonsense, yet it slid into Lena's mind and found a place to sit as if it belonged. "You get a lot of folks in that situation?" she asked. "Only when it's thick enough you can taste it," me replied, flipping eggs deftly. "The lake breathes out, the air holds on. Us, we just make room." Behind them, the jukebox shifted to another song. The selection buttons on its front panel were worn smooth. The little cards behind the glass, listing titles and artists, looked decades out of date. Yet the sound was clear and modern, as if the machine were translating old mediums into something the present could hear. The man's voice crackled over the CB mounted under the counter behind me. Lena hadn't noticed it until now. A base unit, its red display glowing. "That you in there, Harbor?" the voice that had spoken to her earlier asked. Me reached down, tapped the transmit. "Got one of yours," she said. "She's warming up. You behave yourself out there, Dan." "Still here," the voice answered, a hint of fondness in the words. "Next cup on me when I make it in." "You always say that," me said and clicked off. Lena sipped her coffee, watching the exchange with the quiet curiosity of someone who has walked into a conversation that started long before and will go on long after. "Dan sounded familiar," she said. Me's shoulders lifted and fell. They usually do. "Been coming here a lot, has he?" Lena probed. "A while," me said. "Sometimes in a Freightliner, sometimes in a Kenworth, occasionally just in memory. Folks turn up when they're meant to." She slid a plate in front of Lena, eggs, toast, a small scoop of hash browns pressed into a neat oval. The food smelled good, simple and solid. "Eat," me said. "The road'll be there in a bit. No reason to meet it hungry." From an omniscient height, Harbor Lights would have looked like a small, stubborn warmth tucked against the gray, the trucks in its lot like big animals bedding down around a campfire. The highway, bright only where headlights pinned it, curved along the lake's invisible edge. Fog rolled and unrolled, a restless blanket. Time inside the diner didn't quite match what it was doing out there. Lena ate slowly. The food went down easy, grounding her back into her own body in a way she hadn't realized she needed. The eggs had just enough salt. The toast was exactly the right degree of crisp. Around her, conversation moved in low currents. "Went past the same barn twice, swear I did. Thought I was closer to Bay Shore. Then I see that same old billboard for the bait shop again. You know, the one with the..." Sat out there 5 minutes looking at that white. Then decided I'd had enough and pulled in here. No one spoke loudly. No one bragged. The stories had the quiet confessional tone of people admitting to themselves that maybe, just maybe, they had been more tired than they'd realized. After a while, Lena's eyes drifted to the windows again. Outside, the trucks in the lot were still. The fog beyond the guardrail shifted, thin in some places, thicker in others. Once, just for a second, she thought she saw the suggestion of a pier out there, old wood posts jutting up out of the nothingness, but when she blinked, the impression was gone. "How long have you been here?" she asked me. Me paused in wiping a mug. "Long enough to know when someone needs a hot meal and a firm suggestion to take a nap," she said. "Not so long I've forgotten what it feels like on the other side of that door." She nodded toward the lot. "That's not really an answer," Lena said, but there was no sting in it. Me smiled. "You're right." The clock on the wall behind the counter ticked softly. Its face was simple, black hands, white numbers, but no brand name. Lena checked the time on the dash when she'd pulled in. 1:42. Her watch had agreed. Now the clock here read 1:42 as well. Its second hand had moved in quiet, precise steps to that point. It did not seem to move beyond it. She watched it for a full minute, then two. The second hand fluttered, almost as if caught on something. It twitched but did not advance. "Clock stuck?" she asked. "Only on what you brought with you," me said. "When you leave, it'll catch up." "That doesn't make sense," Lena said. "Neither does the same sign 3 times, me replied. "Sometimes the world shrugs its shoulders and does what it wants. You don't have to understand it to take the gift." The idea of leaving pressed at the back of Lena's mind. Her logbook would not mark this properly, she thought. There was no line item for time spent in a place that did not exactly seem to sit on the same grid as the miles outside. And yet, she suspected, if she checked, the hours would all look fine. Nothing over, nothing missing. "You got a place to stretch out?" she asked. "Couple of cots in the back if you don't want to go back to your bunk just yet," me said. "But most prefer their own pillow. Food sits better when you're somewhere familiar. Lena thought of her sleeper, the narrow bunk, the blanket she'd tossed over it that still smelled faintly like her detergent from home, the hum of her own climate control. Maybe I'll finish this, then grab an hour in the cab, she said. That's the way, me nodded. You're lighter when you roll back out. You'll see the curve straight again. When she stepped back out into the lot, coffee warmth in her chest, the cold hit her with gentler hands. The fog had thinned around the immediate area, as if the lights had burned off a layer. Above, the sky showed no stars, but it also no longer sagged quite so low. The truck hulked patiently where she'd left it, its edges defined by the lot lights. As she crossed the pavement, she glanced at the neighboring rigs. Brands and colors from all over the continent, it seemed. Some wore plates from states she wouldn't have expected to see this far north. One had a logo in a language she didn't recognize, flacking at the corners. For just a moment, she had the idea that time here was not divided by years or routes, but by the intensity of someone's need when they pulled in. She climbed into her cab. The interior greeted her with its familiar, slightly cluttered intimacy. The thermos in its holder, the jacket draped over the passenger seat, the small stuffed fox her niece had given her perched on the dash. After a minute's thought, she didn't bother to set an alarm. If Me was right, and something in the steady way the woman had spoken made Lena think she was, the clock would take care of itself. She slipped into the sleeper, drawing the curtain out of habit more than necessity. The hum of the truck, the faint crackle of the radio outside in the diner, and the muffled boom of the lake below blended into something like white noise. Sleep came easier than she expected. No twisting, no second guessing, just a slow letting go. When she woke, the cab was a shade lighter. It wasn't daylight exactly, more like that peculiar palest blue that comes just before dawn. The temperature in the cab had fallen a degree or two. She could feel it against the tip of her nose. She sat up, pushing the curtain aside. Fog still hung over the lake, but it had retreated from the lot. The air out the windshield looked clearer, crisper. The neon lighthouse on the harbor lights sign was off, its tubes dark and unremarkable. Her dashboard clock read 3:16. Her body felt right. Not groggy, not leaden. She swung her legs out of the bunk, feeling the tug of muscles that had finally been allowed to unclench. When she stepped outside again, the lot was emptier. 3 of the rigs she'd seen earlier were gone, their spaces bare. Another, older-looking one remained, the one with the defunct company logo. It sat quiet, its windshield reflecting only the gray sky. The diner's windows still showed warmth, but the glow inside was softer, less golden, more subdued. Lena walked up again, more from a need to say thank you than anything else. The door opened to the same small whoosh. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and something sweet now, maybe cinnamon rolls or some kind of pastry. Me stood at the counter, polishing silverware. You look better, she observed. Feel better, Lena agreed. She glanced up at the clock. 3:16. The second hand ticked along merrily now, as if nothing unusual had ever happened. Road'll treat you kinder, now that you've taken a breath, Me said. Fog's lifting off the worst bits. You'll still want to mind the curves, but they'll only come once this time. Thank you, Lena said simply. Me met her gaze, something like approval there. You're welcome. Pass it on when you hear somebody else out there losing track of where they are. I don't even know how I'd begin to explain this place, Lena said. You don't have to, Me replied. Just tell him to keep an eye out. When the lake gets too loud and the signs start repeating, there's a turnoff with room enough to breathe. Outside from above, harbor lights still looked small. A lonely building on a narrow strip between road and water. But its lights, though they might have seemed ordinary to anyone passing in clear daylight, reached farther on foggy nights than physical distance really allowed. Lena paid in cash. The bill was oddly modest, the prices written on the tab in tidy handwriting: coffee, eggs, toast. The paper was slightly thicker than the receipt rolls she was used to. When she tucked it into her logbook later, it nestled beside other papers as if it had always been there. Back in the cab, she guided her truck out of the lot. The apron met the highway at that same wide, worn edge. For a breath, as her rig eased onto the lane, she wondered if harbor lights would simply fold behind her, vanish as soon as she wasn't looking. In the mirror, the building still sat solidly on its slab. The sign rose above it, the lighthouse outlined dark for now. The fog along the highway ahead lay in lower swaths, leaving gaps where she could see the suggestion of waves breaking below and the faint horizon line beyond. The curved sign came once. The little sticker lighthouse waved its ghostly greeting, then bowed out. Mile 87 appeared, then 88, then 89, each only once, each right where it belonged. On the CB, a familiar voice crackled. "You make it in?" Dan asked. "Yeah," Lena replied. "Thanks for the tip." "Any time," he said. "Next cup's on me, remember." She smiled a little. "Me says you always say that." "That's because someday I'll be right," he said. "Keep it between the lines out there." She drove on. In years to come, she would search maps for harbor lights, trucking directories, forums. She would ask older drivers if they'd ever stopped at a place spelled with a U out on Highway 6, somewhere around mile 90. Some would shrug, some would say, "Sounds like you're misremembering Red Harbor." Some few would go quiet for a second and say, "Yeah, I heard about a spot like that. Never seen it myself. Shows up when it wants." And on certain nights, when the lake breathed and the fog rolled thick over the road, the little cartoon lighthouse on that caution sign would catch her eye in a familiar, comforting way. Just a reminder that not every exit was painted on the map. Some only showed themselves when a driver had gone past the same warning twice and needed a place where time waited politely at the door while they came in, warmed their hands on a mug, and let the road outside remember how to run straight again. Story number 5. On nights when the Thule fog came down over the valley, the world forgot how far it was supposed to stretch. Fields that in daylight went on to the horizon shrank to the edge of a headlight's reach. Orchards, silos, and irrigation canals vanished into a blank, luminous wall. Sound folded in, small and muffled, as if the air itself were made of cloth. Sam had driven through coastal fog, mountain mists, and river haze. None of it behaved quite like this. Out here, on the long straight reach of Highway 99 cutting north through farm country, the fog didn't just sit. It seeped. It pooled in low-lying pockets and spilled up over the asphalt in slow surges, filling every gap. It turned the simple line of road into something that felt both narrow and bottomless. Inside his cab, the world was defined by warm light and familiar sounds. The dash glowed in a soft constellation of greens and ambers, each gauge a steady, reassuring point. The radio played low, a late-night host murmuring through static between songs, their voice distant and gentle enough to become another texture in the background. The engine under him hummed its deep, continuous note. He could feel the vibration through the soles of his boots and up through the seat, a kind of mechanical heartbeat that matched his breathing more than the clock. Tires whispered over damp asphalt. Every so often, a seam in the concrete made a small, regular thump that marked distance more reliably than mile markers in this weather. Sam's hands rested on the wheel, not tight, not lax. His shoulders carried a low, familiar tension, the kind that came at the end of a long run, when the body knew it was tired but the mind stayed held in that high, clear place where attention lived. The fog had been patchy at first. He'd left the last truck stop under a sky that still showed a few stars, faint against city glow. A pale haze hung low over the fields, but the road itself had been clear, flanked by dark silhouettes of trees and the occasional farmhouse porch light. Then the haze thickened into a low-lying white. Then it rose. Now, 20 miles farther on, there was no horizon, no sky, no sense of anything beyond the front fenders. The high beams only made it worse, turning the fog from pale suggestion into a glowing wall that bounced light right back into his eyes. He dropped to low beams, let his speed ease down, and settled into the patient, careful pace fog demanded. Signs announced themselves only when they were already almost upon him. A green rectangle would swell out of the blankness, float for a few seconds in his headlights, its reflective letters sharp and oddly floating, then slide past into nothing. Sacramento 82. Stockton 24. RIVRDLE exit 2 MILES. It all felt both real and abstract, numbers without landscape. On either side of the highway, the land was flat and endless, but tonight it might as well have been painted over in white. Somewhere out there, grapevines sat in neat rows. Almond and walnut orchards stood with their branches bare and still. Irrigation ditches lay small and silent. The CB whispered in its bracket. Every so often a hiss sharpened, resolved into a half-heard word, northbound, visibility, mile marker, before dissolving again. Sam took a sip from his travel mug. The coffee had cooled to that lukewarm zone that tasted less like coffee and more like a memory of coffee. It was still bitter enough to wake up his tongue. The warmth that slid down his throat was modest but steady. He blinked, slow and deliberate once then again, feeling the dryness at the corners of his eyes. The day had started long before dawn in Bakersfield. Freight loaded, paperwork signed. Hours of driving broken by only a brief stop for fuel and a sandwich in a plastic wrapper. He had planned to make it to Lodi before shutting down. A few more miles, maybe an hour if conditions played nice. But the fog had its own plans. A faint glow appeared ahead, low and red, like an ember being coaxed. Tail lights. Sam's pulse lifted a fraction, not in alarm but in recognition. The simple fact of another set of lights out here in the white made the world feel less hollow. He eased off the accelerator just a touch, giving himself room. The red lights swelled as he closed, then settled into a comfortable distance ahead, maybe 10, 12 truck lengths. Enough time to react, enough to keep them from feeling like a wall. The other vehicle's outline blurred in the fog. From this distance, he could just make out the boxy suggestion of a trailer and the faint green glow of a company placard up high on the back doors. He couldn't read the name. The fog smeared the letters into a pale band. His own low beams bathed the trailer's lower half in a soft wash of light, turning the reflective tape along the bumpers into bright, glowing stripes. The combined effect was oddly soothing. 2 red eyes ahead, a pale bar, the small, regular sway of the trailer as it followed the slight imperfections in the lane. Sam settled in behind, matching his speed to the other driver. The world shrank even further. His universe became that pair of taillights, the constant echo of his own engine, the smooth arc of his speedometer needle, and the small expanse of road between his front bumper and the red lights ahead. Behind him, the fog was a mirror. His side mirrors showed nothing but white and the ghost of his own trailer's running lights reflecting back. "Nice to have company," he murmured, more to the road than to himself. The CB crackled, almost as if in response. "Convoy's holding steady at 50, a voice said, thin through the static. "Keep it tight, folks. This soup's not letting up." Convoy. Sam glanced at his mirrors again by reflex. Behind and beside him there was only white. No other lights, no sense of bulk. The reflective stripping on his own trailer glowed faintly on the edges of the mirror glass, nothing more. He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it, not quite sure the message had been meant for him. CB chatter sometimes overlapped from miles away. Could be some group of rigs out past Modesto, could be somewhere entirely else. The voice, though, had that oddly direct quality of someone speaking into a room, they knew you were in. He reached for his mic anyway, fingers wrapping around the worn plastic. The coiled cord stretched. "This is northbound on 99 about 15 past Riverdale," he said. "You talking to me, driver, or is there another fog bank up there I should know about?" Static filled the cab for a moment, as if the radio were taking a breath. Then the same voice came back, a touch clearer this time. "That you tuckin' in behind the old Reynolds trailer?" it asked. Sam's eyes flicked to the taillights ahead. "Maybe," he said cautiously. "Hard to read the logo through this stuff." "Green rectangle," the voice said. "White letters. Left corner's got a little chip in the paint." Sam squinted. Now that it was mentioned, he could see a small imperfection in the glow. The top left edge of the company placard was indeed darker, as if a piece had been knocked off and never quite repainted. "Yeah," he admitted, "that's the one." "Then that's you," the voice said. "Welcome to the line. You've got 3 ahead and 2 behind. Keep your pace. Don't lose the lights." From above, if the fog had thinned enough to allow such a view, a thin, strung-out line of motion would have been visible in that moment. The faint dots of 6 sets of headlights and taillights, spaced evenly, crawling through the white along the dark ribbon of highway. From Sam's driver's seat, there was only the one pair of lights ahead. He turned his head, peering into his mirrors again. The white glared back, indifferent and complete. "I'm not seeing anybody behind me," he said, keeping his tone more conversational than concerned. "Just me and this Reynolds, far as my eyes say." "Fog'll do that," the voice said easily. "You're in the pocket right now, just trust it. Convoy's tighter than it looks." The word pocket sat in his thoughts for a moment, unsettling and oddly apt. He listened more carefully to the sound of his own rig. Tires, engine, a faint whistle where a tiny gap in the window seal let in a thin thread of outside air. No new noises. No reason to suspect anything was different tonight from 100 other foggy nights. Except, perhaps, the company names in the voice. "Reynolds went under before I started driving," Sam said, half to see what answer he'd get. "You don't see their trailers much anymore." "They're still out here," the voice replied. "Somewhere between the lanes and the years. We run when we're needed. Nights like this mostly." A little prickling sensation rose along the back of Sam's neck. Not sharp, not fearful, but alert, like standing near a static-charged TV screen. "Name, Sam," he said after a beat. "Who am I talking to?" "Most folks call me Hutch," the voice said. "Makes it easier on the radio. You ought to relax your grip a hair, Sam. I can hear your knuckles squeaking from here." In spite of himself, Sam's mouth ticked up at one corner. He consciously loosened his hold on the wheel. The vinyl sighed beneath his palms. Ahead, the taillights remained steady. They didn't break unexpectedly. They didn't surge forward. Whoever was driving that Reynolds trailer maintained a perfect, almost metronomic pace. "So what's the trick?" Sam asked. "You all just figure if you pretend hard enough the fog isn't there." "Nah," Hutch said. "We just remember it's got edges. Folks out here alone, they forget that. They start thinking the white goes on forever. That's when you start drifting without knowing you're drifting." Sam shifted in his seat, feeling the quiet ache in his lower back. He rolled his shoulders carefully. The movement sent tiny crackles up his spine. "How long you been up?" Hutch asked. The tone was friendly, but there was a depth beneath it, a familiarity with the answer before it came. "Legally," Sam said. "Not long enough to worry. Started this leg a few hours back." "And before that," Hutch pressed gently. Sam thought of the early alarm, the pre-trip under still dark yard lights, the loading dock, the paperwork, the small tasks that weren't driving but felt the same to the body that did the driving. "A bit," he allowed. "Been a day." "Yup," Hutch said. "Fog doesn't care what your logbook says. It just sees the weight on your eyes." A new glow appeared ahead, hazy through the fog. An overhead highway sign. Its green surface floated closer, letters resolving. Fog area next 20 miles. Use low beams. No stopping Owen's shoulder. Sam snorted softly at the last line, as if anyone would want to sit still in this. The tail lights of the Reynolds rig ahead passed under the sign. For a moment, the green reflected faintly on the wet top of the trailer. Then it vanished into white again. Sam followed. You run this stretch a lot, he asked. Often enough, Hutch said. Sometimes northbound, sometimes south. Depends on who needs a lane holder. A lane holder, Sam repeated. That what we're doing? What it feels like sometimes, Hutch said. You ever notice how your truck'll stay truer when you've got something to follow? Not tailgating, just tucking in. Lights ahead give your brain something to chew on besides the empty. He had noticed. Any driver who'd done enough miles in the dark had. The difference between staring into a blank roadway and letting someone else's taillights anchor you was subtle but real. You could do worse for company than this outfit, Hutch added. We mind our speed. We don't slam our brakes. We don't play games in weather like this. Sam watched the red lights ahead carefully. They did, indeed, behave impeccably. Whoever was up there drove like someone who knew this road and respected it. You all out of Stockton? He asked. Or was that Bakersfield back in the day? Depends when you're asking, Hutch said, and there was that faint sideways twist in the answer again. Reynolds had a lot of yards, some came and went. We remember most of them, one way or another. Sam caught movement in his perimeter vision. For just half a second, his right side mirror showed another pair of headlights behind him, small and white, tucked neatly into the lane with a respectful gap. A dark shape attached, maybe a cab over, maybe something older. Then the fog curved and thickened, and the light smeared, then vanished. He flexed his jaw, an automatic response to the small jolt of adrenaline. You said there were two behind me, he said. They're there, Hutch replied. Don't fuss yourself unless you see 'em trying to crawl inside your trailer. They're just ridding the pocket same as you. The CB fizzed. Another voice came through, a little higher, with a faint accent from somewhere farther east. Lead, this is third, it said. Visibility's holding about the same, still good on fuel. You think we ought to tighten up before the next junction? Negative third, Hutch replied, his tone easy but firm. Keep it where you are. No heroics. We're all getting there or we're all sitting it out. Nobody breaks the line. Sam listened to this little exchange with the sensation of hearing only half an orchestra. He couldn't see the trucks Hutch was talking to, but he could feel them now, in the slight changes of air pressure, in the almost inaudible variations in the road noise, like huge, careful animals moving in step around him. He wondered briefly how many nights like this these unseen companions had worked. How long you been doing this, Hutch? He asked. There was a pause that stretched just a half-beat longer than polite. Long enough to know every billboard out here by heart, Hutch said lightly. Long enough to know which mile markers make people's hands shake a little when they pass them. The answer could have meant 20 years, or more. Sam exhaled slowly. Ahead, the faint red lights glowed on, unwavering. The engine under him purred. The white outside his windows pressed close and intimate. On the omniscient map, the valley lay like a shallow bowl. The highway cut a straight line up its middle. The fog filled the bowl almost to the brim. In that white, a small string of motion threaded. 6 rigs, each from a different run, a different year, a different dispatch. Their times overlapped here, in this narrow column of reflected light. Ever see anyone peel off? Sam asked quietly. Lose the lights and go their own way in this stuff. Sure, Hutch said. Sometimes they're fine. Road spits 'em out a few miles later, a little rattled but fine. Sometimes they end up sleeping in their own lot with no recollection how they got there. Sometimes. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Sam's mind supplied the quieter possibilities. Someone waking up hours later in a rest stop they didn't remember entering. Someone nudging over the fog line and correcting in time. Nothing graphic. Just that soft, unsettling knowledge that the line between fine and not fine could be as thin as a second's inattention on a white, empty road. "You," Hutch asked, turning the question gently back, "you ever bail on a good line?" "First time I've seen this kind of line," Sam admitted. "Usually it's just me and whatever sad little sedan I'm trying not to run down." "That's why we're here," Hutch said. "Fog pulls people apart. We pull them back into something that resembles a shape." The miles slid by. Sam stopped counting them as numbers and began to feel them as breaths. Each exhale seemed to match the passing of a reflector post on the right. Each inhale matched the small, barely perceptible sway of the trailer ahead. The tension in his neck loosened a bit. His hands, though still firm on the wheel, no longer gripped, as if he were the only thing keeping the rig from drifting into some unseen ditch. A new light source glowed faintly above the fog. An overhead message board. Its amber letters bled downward into the white as they approached. "Dense fog. Slow 245. Use extreme caution." The convoy's pace was already in that range, steady and conservative. No need to adjust. "Junction coming up in 10, Hutch said into the CB. "Sam, you still with us?" "Still see your tail," Sam replied. "Good," Hutch said. "You're gonna see some headlights joining from the right soon. Lot of folks think they can blow through the clover leaves like it's clear weather. They see a gap and punch it. They don't see the rigs in the wall." His voice softened a notch. "Stay on the Reynolds. We'll make room where there is no room." From above, the interchange cut a crooked X into the white. Ramps curled, unseen, over and under each other. Cars slid along them like small, determined fish, their drivers trusting muscle memory more than sight. As the convoy approached, a small sedan did indeed nose cautiously down the on-ramp to Sam's right. Its headlights materialized suddenly in the fog, startlingly close. Sam's body responded before the conscious thought formed. His foot touched the brake, his hands braced. The taillights ahead glowed a little brighter, a small, measured deceleration. He matched it. Then something subtle happened. The air around his truck seemed to change pressure. A faint crosswind that hadn't been there before eased off. The whine of his tires on the asphalt took on a slightly different tone, lower and broader. The sedan, which had looked set to try to wedge itself between his rig and the Reynolds, passed through a gap that should have been too small and merged smoothly into the next lane down the line. If someone had taken precise measurements of the spacing between the rigs at that moment, the numbers would have refused to add up. And yet, in that elastic way the road sometimes made room under pressure, there had been exactly enough. "See," Hutch said quietly, "we hold the pattern holds back." The interchange slid by. The sedan's taillights drifted off at an exit a few minutes later, its driver never knowing they'd traveled for a brief stretch inside a shape held together by more than just painted lines. Sam let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "How much farther you riding this?" he asked. "Till the fog gives you back the horizon," Hutch said, "or till you hit your turn, whichever comes first." "I'm headed for Lodi," Sam said. "Catch some sleep, unload in the morning. Hadn't planned on doing anything unusual." "Lodi's a good spot," Hutch approved. "We'll see you to the edge. After that, you're on your own clear patch." The fog began, almost imperceptibly, to thin. It didn't lift all at once. It unspooled. The whiteness ahead became less solid, its density flickering. The glare of his own headlights softened. 10 yards of visibility became 20, then 30. Shapes emerged at the very edge of what he could see. Dark smudges that resolved into trees, telephone poles, the faint lines of fences. Above, a strip of sky appeared, a darker gray than the fog, but distinct from it. The dome over his cab no longer felt as low. Ahead, the taillights of the Reynolds rig burned on, unwavering. "Marker 270, Hutch said. "You ought to be seeing that in about now." On cue, a green sign loomed up on the right. Mile 270. The numbers glowed in his beams, then slid past. Sam felt an odd wave of gratitude for their simple, faithful presence. "You getting out here?" he asked, "or you ridden further?" "Got another hand needs a line past Galt," Hutch said. "We'll part when your exit sign says so. No sense in dragging you further than you need to go." He almost asked who, we. But he knew the answer wouldn't be simple, and he was strangely content not pushing it. Some things on the road just were. They passed under a series of overpasses in quick succession. The undersides flashed over his cab like dark, brief ceilings. Above them, town lights glowed faintly. A soft orange wash filtered through clearing mist. Exit signs began to appear more frequently, promising gas, food, lodging. Lodi next 3 EXITS. He was closer than he'd realized. His fatigue, which had receded to the edge of his awareness in the comfort of the line, now tapped gently at his focus again. Not dangerous, not yet, but clear. His body looking forward to stillness. "Exit in a mile," Hutch said. "You'll see a Love on the right. Decent coffee, showers that don't make you wonder too hard. Good place to call it." "You've got opinions," Sam said. "Been around," Hutch replied. The fog at the ground level was now more like a low haze, clinging to the ditches and creeping along the edges of the fields. The lane markings ahead were clear. Brake lights on cars up ahead flickered in normal, predictable patterns. Sam could have, at this point, said he didn't need the lead lights anymore. He stayed behind them anyway. The sign for his exit sprang up, big and familiar. Lodi, KTTLMA and Doctor. Exit 271, 1 mile. The Reynolds rig ahead clicked on its turn signal. "So did he." "That your stop too?" Sam asked. "For tonight," Hutch said. "This leg anyway." The off-ramp peeled away to the right. The convoy, the truck Sam couldn't see but could feel, followed the gentle curve. As his cab arced along, he glanced in the big convex mirror. For the first time, the fog was thin enough that the world behind him was more than just white. There in the glass he saw lights. Not just the soft glow of his own trailer markers, but other tail lights and headlights, strung out along the highway like tiny beads fallen on a dark cloth. And more faintly, right behind his rig, 2 sets of headlights spaced evenly. One belonged to a cab-over with a paint scheme he'd only ever seen in old photographs, high stripes in colors that went out of fashion decades ago. The company name along the side was one he recognized from a list of carriers that had folded in the early 2000s. Beside it, another rig, longer nose, square hood. Its logo was unfamiliar, its colors muted. Its license plate, for the fraction of a second he could see it, bore a date sticker that didn't match any current year. Then the ramp curved further. The mirror caught only the side barrier and the shimmer of his trailer, and the glimpse was gone. He didn't feel fear. He felt something quieter, a sense of having brushed against a much longer line of nights and drivers than he had known he was part of. The Love's truck stop lot opened ahead, lights bright and ordinary, air above it clear. The Reynolds rig rolled into the lot entrance, turn signal still ticking. Sam followed. They wound through the parking lanes at a modest crawl. Dozens of trucks sat nose out in their spaces, lined in neat rows. Some idled, their engines rumbling softly. Some were dark and quiet. The sodium vapor lot lights painted everything in a gentle, amber wash. The Reynolds took a space along the far fence, pulling through with the quiet competence of a driver who had been backing and parking most of their life. Sam slid into the spot one over, leaving a polite gap. When he set his brake and cut his engine, the sudden quiet in the cab felt profound. For a moment he just sat, hands still on the wheel, eyes on the red glow of the other trailer's marker lights. They winked off. Not all at once, not in a flashy way. One by one, as if someone inside had flipped switches in a casual, unhurried line. The green placard at the top of the doors dimmed. The trailer became just a dark, ordinary rectangle in the orange wash of the lot. The CB crackled one last time. "Get yourself some sleep, Sam," Hutch said. "Fog's gonna be somebody else's problem by the time you roll again." "You too," Sam replied, then on impulse added, "Thanks for the company." "Any time," Hutch said. "That's what we're here for." The carrier light on Sam's CB flickered, just once, as if in acknowledgement, and went still. He climbed down from the cab. The air out here was damper than in town, but clear. He could see stars in a few patches between high, thinning clouds. Around him, normal truck stop life went on. A driver trudged across the lot with a shower bag slung over one shoulder. Another tightened a strap on a flatbed, breath puffing in the cold. A car idled near the convenience store entrance, hazard lights blinking. When he glanced at the Reynolds trailer again, it looked like any other older unit. A little battered, paint dulled, company name faded but legible. Reynolds Freight. He looked them up once out of curiosity. Logistics history. They'd merged with another outfit long before he had ever taken his CDL test. He considered briefly, walking over and knocking on the cab door, meeting Hutch face to face, putting a shape and a smile to the voice that had held the line in the white. But something in him resisted. It felt wrong somehow to press through whatever gentle veil had lain between them, to turn what had been a presence into proof. He settled for a small nod in the trailer's direction instead. From above, the lot was just another bright patch on the map, a familiar cluster of rectangles and lines, easy to spot from the air. The highway beyond, its foggy stretch already easing, glowed with little moving specks of light. Somewhere out there, on another night in another patch of heavy mist, a new line of trucks would string itself along a narrow, uncertain lane. Voices would murmur on the CB. Tail lights would glow a steady, reassuring red. Back in his cab, Sam filled out the last lines of his log, the pen moving automatically in neat block letters. In the margin, where no one but him would see, he wrote a single word. Convoy. No time stamp, no miles, just the reminder. Then he laid down in his bunk, pulled the blanket up, and listened for a minute to the soft ticking of the cooling engine and the distant, low sounds of the stop. Air dryers, a horn far away, muffled laughter near the store. Sleep came when it came, without the sharp edges of worry. The white walls of fog, the red glow of taillights, and the slightly amused, steady voice on the radio blurred into a single, calm impression. Out beyond the well-lit island of the truck stop, the valley waited. Fog would rise again on other nights, closing the world down to a tunnel of light. Drivers would enter that tunnel carrying their own private measures of weariness and resolve. And sometimes, in the densest parts, a voice would crackle through their speakers, saying something like, "Go ahead and tuck in, driver. You're in the line now. Just keep your distance and hold steady. We'll get you through."